हेलो, गुड मॉर्निंग। आवाज आ रही है सबको? पीछे तक आ रही है? आराम से है पीछे? सब बढ़िया? ऑल ऑफ यू आर वेल फेड? प्यास नहीं लगी है? पानी पी लिया? और वॉट एवर यू ड्रिंक इन द मॉर्निंग, चाय, कॉफी? चलिए, लेट्स गेट स्टार्टेड। सो फर्स्ट थिंग is there any question that I should be addressing from what we did in the last class, or whatever you may have read in the interim time, the time between the last class and now? Have you read anything in the newspaper? Is there any question? So that is what we will be doing. We'll be taking questions the first thing in the class. आफ्टर द ब्रेक, जब हम ब्रेक लेते हैं उसके बाद हम डाउट्स और प्रॉब्लम्स लेंगे, और उसके बाद टुवर्ड्स द एंड ऑफ द क्लास आई एम हियर, है ना? सो इफ यू हैव एनी क्वेश्चंस, डोंट बी शाई. Don't think that if you speak somebody would laugh or I would laugh. It is not about that. Ultimately you would have to speak someday. Right, so in the last class what were we doing? Where were we? Neighborhood first policy. Can somebody tell me what are the important factors in the neighborhood first policy? Okay, so the neighborhood first policy simply states that India's neighbors would be given priority, all right, diplomatic and political priority in its foreign relations. That is what India is saying simply. Generally, every policy would have some simple intent, and then how would India accord this diplomatic and political priority? On what basis? Cooperation in certain defined areas like connectivity, infrastructure, capacity building, people to people ties. You can also add cultural ties, you can also add humanitarian assistance, disaster relief. ये आप अपने सोच से जोड़ सकते हैं कि this is what India is doing, right? For example, we sent wheat to Afghanistan. In what context? There was a disaster. So it is a humanitarian assistance, it is also a form of disaster relief. So as you are reading newspaper, as you are regular with your studies, what would happen? You would be able to add to these things. If you think that some of the points are general in nature, you can add specifics to it. So that brings difference from one candidate to another candidate. एक candidate होगा वो बैठ जाएगा ये सोच के क्लास में पढ़ाया मैं वही लिख के आऊंगा. Another candidate would do what? Make additions. If you are reading something, you understand the context, you quickly pick up the example. What else would India do apart from this form of cooperation? Needs-based assistance. So basically we define our help as needs-based development assistance, meaning we are helping our neighbors on the basis of their needs, not our vision of what they need. We don't define what their needs are. We rely on what they say their needs are. All right? So that is what we are saying, that you identify your needs and we would try and do whatever we can. What else? Indian Ocean. So in recent times, generally this understanding has been there in India's foreign policy that Indian Ocean is important. But the strategic significance of Indian Ocean has been increasing. So thereby the neighborhood first approach, or in the era of neighborhood first approach, we also now see an increasing focus towards the Indian Ocean region as a part of India's neighborhood, or as India's link with distant regions. So we consider Indian Ocean to be a bridge of sorts. Right, so this is what we are trying to do through neighborhood first. And by doing so, what is it that we are expecting? What is it that we want to achieve? Yes, we want to create a narrative of leadership, right? ये लिखा था कि नहीं लिखा था हमने? A narrative of leadership which is acceptable to our neighbors, right? Either we can become leaders by saying so, or by the virtue of coercion, or by persuasion. Coercion is not always going to work, and it is not always required, right? So that is what is the idea of neighborhood first is, right? It is not science. So ultimately See, if you read any speeches of Prime Minister or Foreign Minister or Foreign Secretary about, if the newspaper is covering it about foreign policy, and if they are saying something about neighborhood, then you can include it as part of neighborhood first, because it is the current neighborhood policy, current neighborhood formulation that we have. Governments, after governments, somebody would call it something else. Earlier there was Gujarat Doctrine, now there is neighborhood first. But the issue is that neighborhood remains important for India's interests, right? That is something that you should remember. Every government would ultimately pay focus to our neighborhood. We can't become superpower without a safe, secure and stable, prosperous South Asia. यहाँ से सब शुरू होता है. Now, what are the limitations that neighborhood first faces? Let's simply discuss a few things about that. What are the limitations that the neighborhood first faces? Two big enemy countries like Pakistan and China. Okay, understanding के level पे ठीक है. What else? Ideological diff किसके साथ? सबके changes of political regimes. What else? इधर से कोई बोल रहा था? हाँ? Boundary disputes. Okay, good. Competition. Okay, from China. So all of you are, कोई और add करना चाहता है? If somebody wants to add, they can. Democratic? Okay, पीछे से. Financial burden on whom? आप पे. Right, so all of you are correct. The limitations that the neighborhood first approach faces can be identified into few major points. One, even in the era of neighborhood first, difficulties with Pakistan remain. चाइना को अभी किनारे कर देते हैं. नेबरहुड फर्स्ट चाइना के बारे में नहीं है ना? चाइना के बारे में नेबरहुड फर्स्ट नहीं. किसके बारे में है? साउथ एशिया. All right, we have a separate China policy. China is dealt separately. So Ministry of External Affairs has divisions, right? Divisions. Each division has certain areas of responsibility. So China is dealt with separately. So understand, when we are talking about neighborhood, we majorly first are talking about South Asia. And then when we visualize our neighborhood in an extensive manner, we start talking about China as well. We have a understanding that China is also our neighbor, but is a different neighbor, characteristically a different neighbor as compared to other South Asian countries. So even in the era of neighborhood first, problems with Pakistan persist, right? Even in the era of neighborhood first, problems with Pakistan persist. We are simply saying that neighborhood first is not going to be adequate to deal with Pakistan, meaning with that country we may need to have a slightly different policy. Generally neighborhood first is okay, but with Pakistan we require a different approach. One, in the case of Pakistan, neighborhood first has certain obvious limits because Pakistan would not reciprocate. All right, in simple terms. Secondly, neighborhood first approach faces stiff competition from increasing presence of China in India's neighborhood. Neighborhood first approach faces stiff competition from China in India's neighborhood. All right, neighborhood first approach faces stiff competition from China in India's neighborhood. For example, now देखो जब आप लिखते हो एक जनरल आर्ग्यूमेंट दिया, फिर try and give an example. For example, there can be many examples. All our neighbors except Bhutan have endorsed China's Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. Right? All our neighbors except Bhutan. Only Bhutan and India are away from BRI. All other neighbors have endorsed the BRI. Right? Similarly, India cannot at this juncture compete with China's checkbook diplomacy. Right? China has larger fiscal ability to spend or to invest. That is what we are simply saying. So there is a competition. It is happening, neighborhood first is happening in the context of China also getting keenly involved in India's neighborhood, right? Thirdly, what can we say? हमने पाकिस्तान ले आए हम और चाइना को हम साउथ एशिया में ले आए, है ना. एक तरीका होता हम कहते चाइना को अलग तरह से डील करते हैं, हमने कहा कि चाइना साउथ एशिया में जो कर रहा है, तो चाइना को भी आप इस्तेमाल कर सकते हैं. जो आप सोच रहे हैं, व्हाट यू आर थिंकिंग, योर पॉइंट मे बी राइट, बट जस्ट थिंक इन व्हाट वे इट वुड बी मोस्ट appropriate to write. All right, so what China is doing in South Asia is of importance here. Thirdly, what can you say? Conflict with Bhutan? हमारा कहाँ से कॉन्फ्लिक्ट है उनके साथ? हाँ, मुझे पता है आप क्या कह रहे हैं, पर हमारा उनसे कोई कॉन्फ्लिक्ट नहीं है. दैट इज वेल विद इन भूटान्स डोमेस्टिक पॉलिटिक्स, है ना. हमारा कोई कंपटीशन नहीं है उनके साथ. डिफरेंट कंट्रीज में हैव डिफरेंट प्रायोरिटीज, बट वी हैव सेड दैट नीड्स बेस्ड असिस्टेंस देंगे, आप आइडेंटिफाई करिए, आपकी मदद करेंगे. सो बेसिकली व्हाट यू आर सेइंग इज करेक्ट, बट अभी वहां नहीं जा रहे हम. जब भूटान जाएंगे तब जाएंगे. व्हाट एल्स? implementation. Implementation has been a traditional weakness of India's policy approach. Implementation. All right, implementation has been a weakness of India's traditional policy approach. Right? Many people say that India is good at announcing but bad at delivering. All right? India over promises and under delivers. ये बहुत सारे लोगों का क्रिटिसिज्म आता है. सो बेसिकली उसको सिंपल लैंग्वेज में हम लिख देते हैं दैट देयर वीकनेस लाइज इन implementation, right? The weakness lies in implementation. What else can you think of? Is there any other limitation, challenge that you witness? कैसे? वो पॉइंट इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी आपने एक लाइन बोल दी, मुझे समझ में नहीं आया, आप समझाइए. रिलीजन, मैं रिलीजन से दूर रहना चाहता हूं. पोरस बॉर्डर्स नहीं, somebody had इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी का कोई पॉइंट किसी ने कहा था ना. पाकिस्तान के साथ हमने कर दिया. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, अब आप इतना कर सकते हैं कि पहले पॉइंट में फॉर एग्जाम्पल टेररिज्म has been employed, cross border terrorism has been employed by Pakistan against India. वो आप कर सकते हैं. Naga issue with? Naga issue is not a point of contention between India and Myanmar. Nagas live on both sides of the border, but we don't have to paint all the Nagas as a threat to internal security. Nagaland is a part of the Indian Union. So एक पॉइंट और कर लेते हैं. इंस्टेबिलिटी इन द नेबरहुड, हाँ, डोमेस्टिक इंस्टेबिलिटी इन द नेबरहुड, चेंजिंग, किसी ने कहा था पॉलिटिकल रिजीम्स. सो वी वुड सी दैट ऑफ्टन टाइम्स डोमेस्टिक डेवलपमेंट्स हैव अफेक्टेड इंडियाज इंटरेस्ट. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, मोस्ट प्रोमिनेंट एग्जाम्पल वुड बी श्रीलंका, अफगानिस्तान, मालदीव्स, म्यांमार रहने दीजिए अभी, है ना. In recent years, we have seen that 2012 to 2018, Maldives had certain internal issues which had direct implications for India's interest. In Sri Lanka also, changing governments always raise the speculation about what would happen to India's relations with Sri Lanka. All right. So basically, stability and political transition in the neighborhood remains a constant challenge for the successful implementation of neighborhood first approach. You can think of various points, but most of the things that you would think would be example of one or the other point that we have written. All right. If you are interested to make a point on internal security, you can also make that. But here that is not the point. The point is to identify what is most relevant, right? So one is A, in our neighborhood with Pakistan, neighborhood first would always face limitations. Simple reason can be Pakistan may not reciprocate. Characteristically, it's a different kind of relationship. B, we are facing competition. We are not the only one. If our neighbors have needs, then China is also coming, and China has a bigger, fatter checkbook. C, when we announce projects, it is in the implementation that the test is. And fourthly, there are certain things which may not be in our hands. For example, political transitions, instability in our neighboring countries. These are the 4 points that we can think of. Now, अगला स्टेप यूपीएससी क्या चाहेगा आपसे? वे फॉरवर्ड का क्या मतलब होता है? व्हाट इज द मीनिंग ऑफ वे फॉरवर्ड? Go right and take a left. So way forward can mean a lot of things. Sometimes you can suggest to improve things, right? Sometimes you can identify problems also. That can also be way forward. But certainly we have already identified challenges. So now our job is how can the neighborhood first approach be made more effective? All right? That is the way forward. So what can be done? What can be done? हाँ, तो कोऑपरेशन तो एक छोटा शब्द हो गया, मैं उसका क्या मतलब निकालूं? What is the meaning of cooperation? So when you are thinking about way forward, when you are thinking about a solution, it is good to link it with the problems that you have identified. है ना? तो there is a logical flow, consistency to your arguments, right? So first thing, what can we do? Leveraging the factors of geography, geography and culture. Leveraging the factors of geography and culture would help in making neighborhood first effective. Would help in making neighborhood first effective. Leveraging the factors of what? Geography and culture would help in making neighborhood first effective. I'm trying to be as simple as possible. Some of you would be more intelligent than that. So you can, but the idea is to understand the broad things. What do we mean by this? You see, China is not a South Asian country. When Sri Lanka faces any problems, India is the closest geographically. China is not an Indian Ocean country. When Maldives faces problem, India is the closest geographically. So that is the factor of geography. China does not share a border with Bangladesh. We do. All right? So that is something that we have to understand. Even when China shares a border with Nepal, our border is in the plains. So it is easily accessible. Culture. Take any country in South Asia, even Pakistan or Bangladesh. We have much in common. We have a large concentration of Muslim population in India. So Islam is a significant religion in India. That is the similarity that we have with Pakistan or Bangladesh. All right? Buddhism. Common shared Buddhist heritage with Sri Lanka and Bhutan. A common shared Hindu heritage with Nepal. All right. Similarly, shared ethnicities. Nagas live on both sides of the border, even with Myanmar. Shared ethnicities across various borders. Shared ethnicities. So, if we can make these an effective instrument of foreign policy by promoting people-to-people ties, by adopting cultural diplomacy, pilgrimage, by promoting ideas such as a Ramayana circuit as the government is doing, or Buddhism, the Buddhist circuit, all right, and other pilgrimages, important holy sites, important cultural sites, cultural cooperation, if we can improve, basically that would soften the ground. That is something that we have as an asset. Geography and culture. Culture में मैं broadly history को भी शामिल कर रहा हूँ. All right, depending on the purpose, you can do so. जहां पे ओपन अप करना है वहां ओपन अप करिए, जहां पे ब्रीफली लिखना है वहां पे ब्रीफली लिखिए. सेकेंडली, व्हाट कैन वी डू? फाइनेंशियल हेल्प किसको? So we do that, na? We provide them development assistance.
And also, sir, we have to be economically strong.
We have to be economically strong. Country specific approach. Country specific approach है in the sense जब हम कह रहे हैं needs based assistance we are providing. So that is there. Right? Secondly, what we can do is we can focus on implementation of announced projects. Focus on the implementation of announced projects. See, use your liberty in such a way that others' liberty is not affected in the class. It's a combined batch. There may be logistical reasons, other reasons. Time भी आपका बचाने के लिए. तो ऐसे क्लास में रहें, अपना भी आनंद लें, लेकिन दूसरों के आनंद में खलल ना डालें, है ना? Please remember this. So what are we saying? Implementation of announced projects needs to be a priority to establish India's credibility as a development partner for the neighbors. Implementation of announced projects needs to be a priority to establish India's credibility as a development partner, for the neighbors. Implementation of announced projects needs to be a priority for establishing or to establish India's credibility. इतना धीरे नहीं हो पाएंगे, थोड़ा आपको तेज होना पड़ेगा. India's credibility as a development partner for its neighbors, है ना? So if we implement in a time-bound manner, in an efficient manner, cost-effective manner, even though we may have less resources, we would be able to establish ourselves as a credible development partner. What else can we do? We face competition from China. So उसके लिए क्या कर सकते हैं? कहाँ से आवाज आ रही है? इंडियाज, अच्छा, dehyphenated foreign policy, इसका क्या मतलब है? हाँ, बताइए कैसे रिलेवेंट है. आपने पॉइंट तो बता दिया, dehyphenated. हाँ, that is where the policy has been stated. Dehyphenation we have announced in the context of Israel and Palestine. But we are not comparing or combining two relations in South Asia. बांग्लादेश का रिलेशन हम नेपाल के साथ कंपेयर नहीं करते, तो यहाँ पे dehyphenation नहीं आएगा, right? Simply, and we are not saying that Bangladesh cannot deal with China. We are not saying that Nepal cannot deal with China. So we are not comparing that. This is a factor of pragmatism that we are acknowledging, realizing that there is a competition. So in that context, what we can do is partnering with like-minded countries. Partnering with like-minded countries for development projects in South Asia. Partnering with like-minded countries for development projects in South Asia. Sorry. Partnering with like-minded countries for development projects in South Asia can augment India's ability, can augment or enhance, जो लिखना है लिख लें, और strengthen भी लिख सकते हैं. Ability, India's ability to effectively implement neighborhood first approach. Partnering with like-minded countries in what? In development projects in South Asia. Can augment India's ability to effectively implement neighborhood first approach, which means what? For example, like-minded countries का example, Japan, US, France, Russia, Australia. We are partnering with Japan, we are partnering with US. हाँ, यूरोप ने भी इनिशिएटिव्स अनाउंस किए हैं. वी हैव अ कनेक्टिविटी पार्टनरशिप विद यूरोप. So depending on the need, depending on whether we can identify common projects and implement them, we can use the help of these countries. Certainly Japan is an important partner. है ना? With US also we have a development partnership. UAE can also be an important country in this context. UAE can also be an important country in this context in South Asia. So basically technology or money, financial resources can be pooled in this way, right? So that is what we can do. 3 things to improve or say that effectively implement neighborhood first approach would require these 3 primary things. Anything else? We can promote tourism. वो आ गया पहले वाले में cultural people to people ties में. आप वहाँ लिख लें एग्जाम्पल. आपके दिमाग में आया है, आपका ही पॉइंट है वो. आप लोग भी लिखना चाहते हैं टूरिज्म प्रमोट करना, वो लिख लें. कल्चरल इज अ ब्रॉड कैटेगरी. कैसे करेंगे? मैंने जब एग्जाम्पल दिया आपको, रामायण सर्किट, बुद्धिस्ट सर्किट, पिलग्रिमेज इज एन एग्जाम्पल ऑफ टूरिज्म, है ना? सो बिल्कुल बिल्कुल टूरिज्म इज अ गुड एग्जाम्पल. यू कैन राइट इट. यस. हाँ, तो ये भी आप लिख सकते हैं. कोऑपरेशन, एनहांसिंग कोऑपरेशन एट मल्टीलैटरल फोरम्स. So the point is that आपके मन में जो आ रहा है वो बोल ले एक बार ताकि आपको सेटिस्फैक्शन हो. क्योंकि अल्टीमेटली स्टूडेंट जनरली यही पूछते हैं, क्या ये भी लिख सकते हैं? माई पॉइंट इज नॉट कि दीज आर दी ओनली पॉइंट्स. माई पॉइंट इज दैट थिंक ब्रॉडली एंड थिंक ऑफ द मोस्ट इफेक्टिव पॉइंट्स. सो बिल्कुल कोऑपरेशन एट मल्टीलैटरल फोरम्स. व्हाट एल्स? एनहांसिंग बायलैटरल टाइज. ठीक है, ये भी कर लें, आप लिख लें. एनहांसिंग बायलैटरल टाइज, 1-to-1 अप्रोच. हाँ, यस. हाँ, that is a good point. Business to business ties. See, relations can be thought of government to government, people to people, and nowadays increasingly we talk about business to business. All right, in enhancing business to business engagements with neighboring countries. ये भी अच्छा point है. So देखो, collective learning हो गई. All right. पर देखो एक चीज और भी याद रखना. In the examination, you are not going to be able to write all these things. You would have to pick and choose. है ना? Why? Because in the examination, you are writing how many words? 150, 250 words. All right? So that is something that you should remember. All of you are correct in terms of your thinking. हो गया neighborhood first. अब आगे चले. Is there any question? हाँ हाँ, पूरा पॉइंट सुन लेते हैं. नहीं नहीं, बिल्कुल. तो आखिरी पॉइंट नहीं सुन पाया मैं. लीडरशिप एक्सेप्टेबल होगा. हाँ हाँ, बिल्कुल आप सही कह रहे हैं. यही नेबरहुड फर्स्ट को इफेक्टिव बनाने की बात करें. नेबरहुड फर्स्ट का एक हिस्सा क्या है? वी वांट टू बी द लीडर ऑफ साउथ एशिया. वी आर द लीडर्स ऑफ साउथ एशिया, बट वी वांट टू क्रिएट एन एक्सेप्टेबल मॉडल. ऑल राइट. सो बिजनेस टू बिजनेस टाइज. सो बेसिकली रिलेशंस आर मल्टी लेयर्ड. One level of relation is between governments, another level of relation is between people, another level of relation is between businesses. All right, so ये भी तरीका आप सोच सकते हैं. We should. फिर जोर से आप बोलिए. आप मास्क लगा के बोल रही, मुझे आवाज आ नहीं रही है. Sit time to time on table. बायलैटरल टॉक्स. बायलैटरल रिलेशंस को इंप्रूव करने की उन्होंने बात की. बिल्कुल आप कह सकते हैं बायलैटरल रिलेशंस को इंप्रूव करना, बट अभी हम एक लार्जर पॉलिसी अप्रोच की बात कर रहे हैं, है ना? उसमें हम कुछ नहीं कर सकते. There are certain things, for example, if we are talking about political instability in the neighborhood, political transition in the neighborhood, it would not be correct to suggest that India should interfere. Non-interference is going to be a cardinal principle. So that is, you have to acknowledge that there are certain things about which one cannot do anything. Pragmatism means accepting those things also where you cannot do anything. Huh? इंडियन ओशन हम अलग से पढ़ेंगे, इंडियन ओशन में अलग से पढ़ेंगे, तो इंडियन ओशन के बारे में अलग से बात करेंगे. राइट, रिस्पॉन्स पोर्टल. आई कांट लुक एट द रिस्पॉन्स पोर्टल, द माउस इज नॉट वर्किंग. मेरे ख्याल से इसमें जो यूएसबी डिवाइस लगती है वो है नहीं. या बैटरी नहीं है, जो भी है. आई वुड लुक एट द रिस्पॉन्स पोर्टल एंड द क्वेश्चंस कैन आल्सो बी सेंट ऑन द coordinators portal if there are any questions or suggestions. Okay, so moving beyond the neighborhood, first we have started talking about India's neighborhood. This is what we have done so far, and we understand that India's dealing with its neighbors is at the level of bilateral relations, one-to-one relations, as well as we take this geography collectively through multilateral or regional approach as well, because we are talking about a large geography. So one way is to deal with countries specifically, another way is to look at the region as a whole, look at the issues collectively, right? Bilateral as well as multilateral and regional approach. So we would start with bilateral relations. We are in the neighborhood, we start with bilateral relations. Generally speaking, barring the last 2-3 years, 50% of UPSC questions in the mains examination have come from the neighborhood. All right, from the neighborhood. In the last 2-3 years, that has not been the case, but previously, since 2013, that has been the case. So that's why the first important module is always going to be neighborhood. We have seen the foreign policy approach. We have basically made it a mind about our neighborhood, that it is going to be important. Now, we start with which country? Pakistan. So I know when it comes to Pakistan, everybody is an expert. Everybody has an opinion. All opinions are respected. Just be reasonable. That is what the requirement of this examination is, being reasonable. Be reasonable in whatever your beliefs are. All right. So, yes, Pakistan. Right. So let's start by taking an opinion poll. Pakistan. When I say Pakistan, what comes to your mind? Here, यहाँ से कोई बोलेगा? From the left. Our leftist friends. From the left. Brother enemy. Brother enemy. इन्होंने मेरा एक point चुरा लिया. Brother enemy. What else? Competition. कंपटीशन हमेशा जो आपसे आगे उनसे करना चाहिए. वीक पॉलिटिकल regimes, fundamentalism, cross border terrorism. What else? पीछे से भी बोल लीजिए आप लोग भी. Border or water? Border. Both. What else? Cultural similarities. चलो कोई एक different point भी किसी ने बोला. Cultural similarities, brother enemy, cultural similarities. What else? What else? Geographically important. किसके लिए? हमारे लिए. क्यों? दे नहीं रहा भाई. चलिए, all of you are right. My point is to ask you these questions is not to prove that you don't know and I know or somebody knows better than the others. The point is that all of you know the points. You have to make your mind about organizing them. All right? Just don't think that you are too intelligent or you don't know anything. Your mind will tell you two things. Some people will think that they are very intelligent. Some people will think, usko aata hai, mujhe nahi aata, that I don't know anything. These two are extremes, come to the middle. Those who know a lot must understand that whatever you do, this examination is going to ultimately test you by asking you to write 150 words and 250 words. वो आपका challenge है. आपको इतना ज़्यादा आता है, करेंगे क्या उसका? वो आपका चैलेंज है। और जिनको लगता है कि मुझको कुछ नहीं आता, तो फिर या तो एग्जाम मत दीजिए। लेकिन अगर आपने देने का डिसाइड किया है, तो इसका मतलब है कि यू आर इंटेलिजेंट इनफ टू मेक दिस डिसीजन, सो नाउ मेक द बेस्ट ऑफ इट। द फील्ड इज ओपन फॉर एवरीवन, राइट? नाउ when you look at this map, there are few things which are very clear. In every class we will start with some sort of a map. We would basically look at the location, because most of the international relations is ultimately about location. If you look at the location of Pakistan, there are few things which should become clear to you. One, a long shared land boundary with India, as well as shared maritime space in the Indian Ocean. Two things should be very clear, that A, it is our maritime neighbor as well as a land-based neighbor, right? B, what should be clear to you is Pakistan is a country which connects South Asia with West Asia, as well as is a transit country towards Central Asia. That is the factor of its location. That is the factor of its location. So combining all these things, you can simply make a statement that Pakistan is geostrategically significant in terms of its location. It's geostrategically significant in terms of its location. Its geography is strategically important. That is the meaning of it. All right? Pakistan's location is geostrategically significant. अब उसका मतलब आपको लगाना है, तो आप साथ में लिख सकते हैं। A, number 1, why its location is geostrategically significant? Number 1 point, shared इंडिया से शुरू करेंगे सोचना है, दुनिया भर की जानकारी होती है, बेसिक से शुरू नहीं करते। ए, नंबर 1 रीजन, शेयर्ड लैंड एंड मैरीटाइम बाउंड्री विथ इंडिया। रिमेंबर, हमने नेबरहुड के बारे में भी ऐसे बात की थी। बी, पाकिस्तान इज ऑफ्टन टर्म्ड एज अ ब्रिज स्टेट, ब्रिज स्टेट कनेक्टिंग वेरियस रीजन्स। विच रीजन्स? South Asia, primarily South Asia and West Asia, and also it provides a transit to Central Asia, Afghanistan and Central Asia, right? That is the meaning of it. The importance of this would become clearer to you when we discuss subsequent points. Now, if you look at within Pakistan, there are few things which should be clear to you. One, Pakistan's resources are limited. Pakistan's resources are limited. Its location is important. That is what, basically, that is the trump card of Pakistan. Pakistan अपने location की खा रहा है. Now, its resources are limited. A, it is dependent on the Indus River. Pakistan has high dependence on the Indus River. Why? Because most of Pakistan is an arid country, desert. All right? So it has high dependence on the waters of the Indus River. Number 2, its agricultural region is predominantly in the Punjab province, right? Size of its agriculture is small as compared to India. Punjab Plains, the most fertile region in Punjab. Again, because of the canal system that the Britishers had created out of the Indus and the tributaries of Indus. All right? So that is another resource that Pakistan has. The agricultural communities in Punjab. Thirdly, it has some petroleum resources, primarily in the province of Balochistan. This is Balochistan. Balochistan shares borders with Afghanistan and Iran, right? Quetta is the capital, and you have a port of Gwadar, right? What is the other resource? Petroleum resources, primarily located in Balochistan. And fourthly, what is the other resource that Pakistan has? It's Indian Ocean coastline. It's Indian Ocean coastline with ports at Karachi and Gwadar. Karachi is in the Sindh province and Gwadar is in the Balochistan province. So that is another resource that Pakistan has. Its coastline in the Indian Ocean with ports like Karachi and Gwadar. The capital is Islamabad. All right, the capital is Islamabad. So sometimes students ask, why is Islamabad Rawalpindi axis mentioned in the newspaper? Because Rawalpindi is a township close to Islamabad, older town, where the military headquarters of Pakistan is located. All right, but Islamabad is the capital. So, and Lahore is the cultural center, and Karachi initially for few days after partition was Pakistan's capital. Karachi is also an important city. Meet Chawla asks, in Pakistan we give the reason of reciprocity, but according to India's foreign policy, we don't seek reciprocity from our neighbors. So, I didn't give the point of reciprocity in the case of Pakistan. I just said that in the case of Pakistan, neighborhood first has limitations. One example is maybe Pakistan would not respond. So, responding is not reciprocity. So that is the clarification, right? Okay, I am now looking at the response box, but in the interest of time, as and when required, I will mention some of the names. So this is basically what you understand by looking at the map of Pakistan. बाकी और कोई आपको मतलब लगाना है आप खुद से लगा लीजिए, right? Now, what is it that we need to keep in mind when we are talking about Pakistan? Some important facts. Pakistan has these provinces: Punjab, Sindh, Balochistan, and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, KPK. They are trying to make Gilgit-Baltistan into a province which is not acceptable to India, right? So even if they declare Gilgit-Baltistan as a province, we would not likely recognize that. We would not be very happy about it. But Punjab, Sindh, Balochistan, KPK, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, these are the provinces of Pakistan. Now, among these, Punjab is the most dominant in terms of either representation in military or agriculture or economy or politics of Pakistan. So thereby, in Pakistan also there are internal differences, right? For example, there is an insurgency in Balochistan where a section of Baloch people is fighting for independence from Pakistan. That is the most recent insurgency that has been in news. And then people in Sindh or people in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa also have disenchantment towards the ruling establishment. All right, so in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, bordering areas with Afghanistan, you have a long-standing insurgency of Tehreek-e-Taliban, Pakistan, all right, or Pakistani Taliban. So Pakistan also has its internal fault lines. There are linguistic differences, there are differences of culture, there are differences of ethnicity. So that these are internal fault lines of Pakistan. Its population is 22 crores, all right, and its GDP is around 270 billion, 80 billion. लेकिन एक जनरल आइडिया आपको होना चाहिए, ये मैं कह रहा हूँ, कोई आपसे पूछने नहीं जा रहा है. These kinds of figures, numbers keep on changing, but you should have a general idea, right, that this is the country that we are talking about. So by any parameter, you must understand that we are ultimately talking about a smaller neighbor. Our news cycles are dominated by Pakistan. Our imaginations are dominated by Pakistan. But ultimately, we are, as compared to India, on most counts, Pakistan is smaller. All right? On most counts, it is smaller. So you should not be competing with Pakistan. Should not be competing with Pakistan. All right? Should not be obsessed with Pakistan. So हर चीज को उसके perspective में रखना जरूरी है. Right? Now let's simply talk about let's make a structure about whatever you know of India-Pakistan relations. So मैंने जब पाकिस्तान कहा तो आपने बहुत सारी बातें कह दी. Now what do you think of India-Pakistan relations is the question. First question was what do you think about Pakistan? When I say Pakistan, what comes to your mind? Second is, in UPSC it is important to read the question correctly and listen to the question correctly so that you can answer correctly. Now tell me, what do you think of India-Pakistan relations? First partition. Partition पढ़ लिया आप लोगों ने? वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री नहीं हुई है अभी? पोस्ट इंडिपेंडेंस वहां आप पढ़ेंगे. चलिए, पार्टीशन. व्हाट डू यू थिंक ऑफ इंडिया पाकिस्तान रिलेशंस? स्टैग्नेंट. समबडी? Stagnant. What else? Regressive bilateral relations. What else? Cultural relations. Religious relations भी हैं. What else? Okay, but all of you have some sense of history, right? What has happened in India-Pakistan relations? अभी यहाँ पे मुझे डायरेक्टिव आया है अभिषेक प्रसाद जी का कि डिक्टेट कराते हैं तो क्लियर से कराइए. अब आई डोंट नो मैं क्लियर से कैसे कराऊं. आप में से किसी को प्रॉब्लम है अभी? हाँ, एक मिनट. गुड. सो दैट इज व्हाट आई सेड द फर्स्ट थिंग इन द क्लास. यस या नो प्रॉब्लम या क्वेश्चन आप रेज करें शुरुआत में. जिन्होंने कहा यस, उनका रिप्रेजेंटेटिव बन के कोई बताएगा क्या प्रॉब्लम है? कोई अब तो हिम्मत करो. भीड़ में सबने हाँ बोल दिया, ना बोल दिया. लेट मी अंडरस्टैंड द प्रॉब्लम. नहीं, आई स्लो डाउन एंड रिपीट व्हेन आई एम डिक्टेटिंग. आई राइट थिंग्स ऑन द बोर्ड. वो आपको लिखना है. ये मैं करता हूं. आई स्लो डाउन एंड रिपीट व्हेन आई एम डिक्टेटिंग. रेस्ट इज टू एंगेज यू. ऑल राइट, कॉन्वर्सेशनल पॉइंट. व्हाट इज इंपॉर्टेंट आई नोट इट डाउन. यहां पे 500 पेज का नोट्स नहीं बनने जा रहा है. डोंट वरी अबाउट दैट. व्हाई? बिकॉज इन इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस थिंग्स आर नॉट स्टैटिक. हिस्ट्री इज नॉट बीइंग रिटन, है ना. कॉन्सेप्ट्स आर नॉट बीइंग रिटन. So that's why the use of board and the use of dictation. हाँ, पीछे से जिन्होंने कहा था कि डिक्टेशन में आपको क्या मदद चाहिए? इधर से सजेशन आ रहा है कि लिखवाओ ही मत. इट इज इंपॉर्टेंट. हमारी अभी दूसरी क्लास है तो ये थोड़ा सा कॉन्सेंसस बना लेते हैं. इधर से आ रही सजेशन लिखवाओ ही मत. आप क्लास के बाद नोटबुक लेके मेरे पास आइएगा. मैं देखना चाहता हूं आपने क्या लिखा है, क्या नहीं लिखा है. और कोई इनका सजेशन है, समझाते समय सिर्फ समझाइए और लिखाते समय सिर्फ लिखाइए. मैं कैसे डिफरेंशिएट करूं कि मुझे कब समझाना है, कब लिखाना है? आपने गुजराल डॉक्ट्रिन लिखा. क्या लिखा गुजराल डॉक्ट्रिन में? क्या क्या पार्ट लिखे? व्हाट पार्ट्स डिड यू राइट? व्हाट इज गुजराल डॉक्ट्रिन? इट्स प्रिंसिपल्स एंड सिग्निफिकेंस, लिमिटेशंस, और क्या लिखा? रिलेवेंस. ये चीजें लिखी 4. ये लिखवाना था. ये लिखा है आपने लिखा है गुजराल डॉक्ट्रिन? कितने लोगों ने गुजराल डॉक्ट्रिन, कितने लोग नहीं लिख पाए? तो जितने लोगों ने लिखा है वो ज्यादा है. ज्यादा लोगों की क्लास में जितने लोगों ने लिखा है वो ज्यादा है. आप क्लास के बाद आ सकते हैं मेरे पास, क्लास से पहले आ सकते हैं मेरे पास जब मैं यहां पे हूं. तो ऐसा होगा अगर सबकी एक एक की डिमांड पे अगर मैं करने लगूंगा तो क्या होगा? नहीं हो पाएगा. नेबरहुड फर्स्ट लिखा कितने लोगों ने? नेबरहुड फर्स्ट लिख पाए आप लोग? अच्छा, दूसरी चीज मैंने आपको क्या बताया, इन द प्रिंटेड मटेरियल चैप्टर 1 यू विल फाइंड गुजराल डॉक्ट्रिन, नेबरहुड फर्स्ट। आपको जब नेबरहुड रिलेशंस के अंत में जाएंगे तो नेबरहुड फर्स्ट एक पेज का आपको मिल जाएगा, वही पॉइंट्स वहां पे दिया हुआ है ना, डोंट वरी अबाउट इट। बहुत ज्यादा लिखाना मेरा पर्पज नहीं है, जस्ट टू मेक अ सेंस ऑफ व्हाट यू नो एंड व्हाट यू शुड बी राइटिंग एंड व्हाट यू शुड बी अंडरस्टैंडिंग, ये पर्पज है। चलिए, ये लिख लिया आपने, पाकिस्तान की लोकेशन क्यों इंपॉर्टेंट है, लिख पाए आप? ओके, तो डिक्टेट में कर नहीं रहा, डिक्टेशन मुझे जिंदगी में एक बार मिली है केवल, व्हेन आई वाज इन क्लास 2 or 3, one of my teachers was absent, so another teacher came and the dictation was writing spellings, है ना, book. So teacher is saying book, you write B-O-O-K book, and then he would check. That is the dictation that I got. तो डिक्टेशन किसी सब्जेक्ट में इंपॉर्टेंट है, किसी सब्जेक्ट में नहीं है। क्यों? क्योंकि हिस्ट्री नहीं पढ़ रहे हैं। तो ध्यान दीजिए थोड़ा, जैसे मैंने कहा, क्लास के पहले अगर कोई सवाल है, क्लास के बीच में अगर कोई सवाल है ब्रेक के बाद, और क्लास के अंत में कोई प्रॉब्लम है, तो आप आइए, मैं यहाँ हूं ना, है ना। क्योंकि बहुत सारे लोग लिख ले रहे हैं, मैं जैसे आगे कुछ लोगों को ऐसे बैठा हुआ देखता हूं, वो लिख ले रहे हैं, है ना, कुछ लोग लिख ले रहे हैं, तो ये मेरा एक रेफरेंस पॉइंट बन जाता है। पीछे वालों से इसलिए मैं पूछता हूं प्रॉब्लम कोई, पीछे वालों से मैं पूछता हूं ना प्रॉब्लम है कोई, या मैं वहां पीछे तक आके भी देखूं। चलिए, so we are talking about India and Pakistan. We talked about simple factors like location. What should you notice? What should you note? 3-4 पॉइंट्स हमने लिखे। अब हम क्या करने वाले, वी हैव 70 years of relations. So 70 years of relations में हम क्या लिखेंगे? We need to have a structure in which we can fit the information, right? कि क्या हुआ है, what is the pattern, right? That is what the job is, because history का तो पेपर है नहीं, हिस्ट्री के क्वेश्चंस आएंगे नहीं। So first thing, let me inform you, first few pages of any relation is what? History. Look at the printed material, you have point wise every year what has happened. All right, what has happened. Now, how it comes into play here? If the historical background of a relation remains relevant or has affected the relationship in an important way, we need to know about it. All right? And then we need to make a sense of the status of relations in the current times. So if I ask you about the nature of India-Pakistan relations, about the nature of India-Pakistan relations, what is the word that we can use? How can we describe it? What do you think about the nature of India-Pakistan relations? कैसा है? Unstable. For some students are saying unstable. What else? आपकी आवाज आई नहीं मेरे, फिर से बोलिए। Right, so you are basically talking about disputes. Bangladesh Liberation War 1971 and Kargil War 1999. So in simple terms, you all know this. 1947 there is partition. 1947, 48, 49 is the period where there is contention in Kashmir, including active fighting. After that, the next war comes in 1965. जो आप पोस्ट इंडिपेंडेंस इंडिया पढ़ेंगे, 1965 इंडिया पाकिस्तान वॉर। आफ्टर दैट 1971 वॉर फॉर द लिबरेशन ऑफ बांग्लादेश। आफ्टर दैट 1999 कारगिल वॉर। बट 1989 onwards we also see another form of conflict, which is either Pakistan's support to insurgency or active promotion of terrorism against India. These are the major points of conflict between India and Pakistan. We all know that. But we also know that there are certain major understandings, negotiations or agreements between India and Pakistan, right? In between. So I know that. I'm not asking that. I'm asking you to describe India-Pakistan relations in one word. Stagnant तो सुन लिया, स्टैग्नेंट के अलावा कोई कुछ बोले? चलिए, वी कैन डिस्क्राइब इंडिया पाकिस्तान रिलेशंस एज डिफिकल्ट रिलेशंस। तो वो था समझाना जो मैं आपसे सवाल पूछ रहा था, ये है लिखाना। अब मैं क्या करूंगा, अब मैं ऐसा करने जा रहा हूं। इंडियाज रिलेशंस विथ पाकिस्तान रिमेन डिफिकल्ट। इंडियाज रिलेशंस विथ पाकिस्तान रिमेन डिफिकल्ट and are considered to be, India's relations with Pakistan remain difficult and are considered to be among the foremost foreign policy challenges, and are considered to be among the foremost foreign policy challenges. India's relations with Pakistan remain difficult and are considered to be foremost foreign policy challenges. All right, so that is basically an understanding of this relationship in simple terms. In simple terms, clarity भी चाहिए होती है यूपीएससी में। clarity 5 लाइन में नहीं आती, कभी कभी आपको 1 लाइन में लिखना होता है। what is the nature of relationship? It is difficult, there is no two way about it. How do we see this relationship in our foreign policy establishment? As a challenge. How should we manage Pakistan? For various reasons, as a challenge. How should we manage Pakistan? Now, that is where you would see that terms like brother enemy are used for this relationship. What is the meaning of this? That India has much in common with Pakistan, but in our view, Pakistan has continuously harmed India's interests. All right? India has much in common with Pakistan, but in our view, Pakistan has continuously harmed India's interest. लिख लिया आपने? आप इधर देखेंगे शिकायत, देखिए सॉल्यूशन ओरिएंटेड होना चाहिए। शिकायत तो मैं भी कर सकता हूं बहुत कि मेरे स्टूडेंट पढ़ के नहीं आते, अखबार नहीं पढ़ रहे हैं, तो इससे फायदा क्या होगा? लिखिए, क्या लिखा आपने? There is much in common. India has much in common with Pakistan. However, Pakistan has continued to harm India's interest. That is the primary consideration that we have. That is the difficulty. और यहां पे हम आइडियल बात कर रहे हैं, that when we look at Pakistan from India, we find that we can peacefully coexist. That is India's foreign policy. We can peacefully coexist. There is much in common, language, culture, history. But what we don't understand, or what peeves us, what troubles us, is that Pakistan has continuously harmed India's interests. All right, harmed. Now, this is basically the nature of relationship, that it is difficult and it is a foreign policy challenge. How to manage this relationship? There is commonality, but then we don't see cooperation, much cooperation. This nature, if we talk about this nature, we are talking about today. Nobody can deny that it's a difficult and challenging relationship. But when we look at history, can we decipher a pattern of this relationship? Is there a pattern in this relationship? Is there a pattern in this relationship? Can we see a pattern? क्यों? एक तरीका होगा कहानी सुना दो कि उस समय ये हुआ, जियाउल हक ने उससे ये कहा। लोग ऐसे कहानी सुनाते जैसे कि वो वहां पे थे उस समय जब बात हो रही थी, या उनका फर्स्ट हैंड एक्सपीरियंस है। दैट इज व्हाई आई डोंट डू इट, बिकॉज आई हैव नॉट बीन प्रिवी टू सच कॉन्वर्सेशंस कि उसने इसको ये कहा। ऑलराइट, बट इफ वी लुक एट द हिस्ट्री ऑफ 70 years, what you will find is that this relationship displays a pattern, clearly displays a pattern. Every month, every year क्या हुआ ये जरूरी नहीं है, but over the years what has happened is it displays a cyclical pattern. So India-Pakistan relations display a cyclical pattern of dialogue, disruption and dialogue. India-Pakistan relations over the years, India-Pakistan relations over the years seem to be stuck in a cyclical pattern. India-Pakistan relations over the years seem to be stuck in a cyclical pattern. Over the years seem to be stuck in a cyclical pattern. What is the cyclical pattern? Of dialogue, D for dialogue, D for destruction, disruption, not destruction, disruption, and D for dialogue. What is the cyclical pattern? Dialogue, disruption, dialogue. So when you have this idea, what you can do is, now you can think of examples. Give me an example of dialogue and give me an example of disruption. If you have some sense of history, you can simply start by looking at how Pakistan and India came to be two independent countries. So you will find that during India's freedom struggle, what happened? There are a lot of things which happened. A lot of people contributed to India's freedom struggle. But majorly there are certain points, इसलिए history books लिखी गई हैं. There is a question of relations between communities, communal relations. And majorly we find 2 points of views. Do we find 2 points of views? One leading to the creation of Pakistan, the idea of two-nation theory, that two larger communities in India, Hindus and Muslims, have separate destinies. They cannot coexist together. So they need separate countries. Right? This idea prominently is taken up by Muslim League under the leadership of Muhammad Ali Jinnah. And then the mainstream of India's freedom struggle, which is the Indian National Congress under Mahatma Gandhi, does not agree with this idea. Right? So when you don't agree, what happens? There are dialogues also. So we are now looking at a conflict brewing up, and that conflict results into what? The events of 1947. Either that be Direct Action Day or partition. Partition itself was a violent event. So that is one example that you see. But prior to that, do you see dialogues between Mr. Gandhi and Mr. Jinnah, Mr. Nehru and Mr. Jinnah? So that is the genesis of it. But now we are talking about independent countries, right? So first conflict that you see, disruption that you see in this relationship is partition. The way these countries are born as independent countries, right? Partition. Partition के बाद क्या हुआ? और example disruption का partition के बाद 1947 to 49 dispute on Kashmir, where the princely ruler of Kashmir decided to merge with the Indian Union, and the instrument of accession as a document is considered to be the legal basis of Kashmir's merger with India. For India, that is indisputable. Pakistan disputed it. Pakistan sent mercenaries. Pakistan invaded Jammu and Kashmir, and India also then countered that. So that is the first conflict that you see. What happens after that? Do you see any other conflict taking place? Let's say 1965, India-Pakistan war. 1971, Bangladesh Liberation War. 1989 onwards, what do we see? Promotion of terrorism and insurgency by Pakistan. 1999, what do we see? The Kargil War. And then you have many such examples. 2001, the period of 2000, 2001, what do we see? One example is attacks on Parliament. Parliament attacks. (2008) 26/11 or attacks in Mumbai, terrorist attacks in Mumbai. What else? 2016, Pathankot Air Force Base was attacked early in that particular year in January, and then in the same year, Uri. 2019, Pulwama terrorist attacks. So these are examples of disruption. Clearly, events of this relationship can be seen to have witnessed significant disruption. But you see, each event of disruption is either preceded by or followed by some sort of dialogue, some sort of engagement. Example बताइए. हाँ, नेहरू लियाकत अली खान agreement, especially on minorities, minority properties. All right. And then you have 1965 से पहले इंडस वाटर ट्रीटी 1960, 1965 वॉर के इमीडिएटली बाद 1966 ताशकंद एग्रीमेंट, ताशकंद एग्रीमेंट 1971 बांग्लादेश वॉर के बाद दी सिमला एग्रीमेंट, 1999 कारगिल वॉर से ठीक पहले लाहौर डिक्लेरेशन, प्राइम मिनिस्टर वाजपेयी विजिटेड लाहौर, उसके बाद सिमला एग्रीमेंट 1972, लाहौर एग्रीमेंट 1999, नॉट 8, 9. ऑल राइट. यहां पे क्या दिखता है आपको? 2001 के बाद 2003 ceasefire agreement between the two governments on the LOC, and after that the beginning of a dialogue process called composite dialogue process, which lasted till 2008, right? And then after that you have, in the period of 2013 to 2016, dialogues named variously: resumed dialogue, comprehensive dialogue. ये हुआ है. This is the example of dialogue. Either you have dialogues or agreements defining or dotting India-Pakistan relations. We have made an attempt to normalize relations. The fact is that those attempts have not been successful. All right. But it is not to say that with Pakistan you can only think of conflict. Conflict, disruption, wars, terrorism are also either preceded by or followed by some sort of dialogue or agreement. That is the meaning of this, that this relationship over the years seem to be stuck in a cyclical pattern of dialogue, disruption and dialogue. So आपने 70 साल की हिस्ट्री 2 लाइन में कवर कर ली. When you say dialogue, disruption and dialogue, you only have to give an example, right? Dialogue, disruption and dialogue. We have simply identified that it is a difficult relationship, it is a challenge. So now what is the reason for this? Why this relationship is difficult? Why is it a foreign policy challenge? And why this cyclical pattern? ऐसा क्यों हुआ है? That is something that we need to explain, right? That is something, because information is a lot. Do you have a framework to explain it? Why this relationship is such? Why do you see it displaying such a pattern? The factors responsible for it. So we can say that there are certain structural factors behind the difficult nature and cyclical pattern of India-Pakistan relations. There are certain structural features or factors behind the difficult nature and cyclical pattern of India-Pakistan relations. What are these factors? क्या सोच सकते हैं आप? Broadly, we can think of A, differences in historical and political narrative. Differences in historical and political narratives. In simple terms, there are deep-rooted differences. There are long-standing differences, difficult to resolve differences. किस लेवल पे? जो हम हिस्ट्री को कॉन्सेप्चुलाइज करते हैं और पॉलिटिकल इश्यूज को कॉन्सेप्चुलाइज करते हैं उस लेवल पे. ऑलराइट, हाउ डू वी रीड हिस्ट्री and how do we look at our politics or most important political issues? The differences are unbridgeable, right? Any example? जिस किसी को समझ में आ गया हो? Any example?
Pakistan thinks that J&K belong to them.
That is one issue. That is one issue. Look at the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. Pakistan opposes that the fact that Jammu and Kashmir is a part of India, does not accept that Jammu and Kashmir is a part of India, still contests that or considers it unfinished business of partition. ये पाकिस्तान का सपना है, सोच है. But for India, that is not the case. For India, Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part of the Indian Union, full stop. All right? So that is one difference. But you can think of differences in various ways. For example, the basis of nationhood. Two nation theory or the idea of two nations within India. This is an idea which is the basis for the creation of Pakistan. Basis for the creation of Pakistan. Does India accept the idea of two nation theory? India does not accept the idea of two nation theory. Why? While Pakistan was created in the name of religion, what kind of country did India decide to become? On the basis of our constitution, we basically continued to believe in the idea of unity in, right? So Pakistan was created and continues to believe in the idea of two nation theory. And India stands for unity in diversity. We don't believe that Hindus and Muslims cannot live together. All right? But that is the basis of creation of Pakistan. That is a fundamental difference. That is a fundamental difference. All right? Independent India accepted Pakistan as an independent state, but not the idea of two nation theory. So Pakistan would say that many in India don't accept Pakistan's existence or Pakistan's right to exist. India has never said that. All across you would see all kinds of governments. 1999, before the Kargil war, you would see that Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who was from the Bharatiya Janata Party, visited Pakistan and paid visit to Minare-Pakistan, which is a memorial for the independence of Pakistan. So that is doing what? That is giving an assurance to Pakistan that India does not mean any harm. India accepts the independence, existence of Pakistan, but India does not accept the idea of two-nation theory. Why? Because if Pakistan stops believing in the idea of two-nation theory, there is no basis for the existence of Pakistan. That is fundamental to its existence. If India accepts two-nation theory, then it is an erosion of our identity, what we are proud of. All right? Similarly, on the question of Jammu and Kashmir, you will find these differences persist. And this is a structural factor. You cannot, by structural factor, we mean those factors which cannot be easily changed. There are many factors, but this is important. How history is taught in Pakistan's schools, how we study history. In India, we study history, whatever your problems with how history books have been written. But if you compare India and Pakistan, history is a very neglected subject in Pakistan. Their history only starts with partition. In India, we have a comprehensive view of history. All right? So that is something that we cannot change. This narrative is what we cannot change. How political establishment in Pakistan talks, how common people in Pakistan are taught in their schools. We cannot change that. So that is why it is a structural factor. Second, right? So that is one line that captures a lot of ideas. Second is domestic factors. Domestic factors, meaning, in simple terms, nature of state and society. Nature of state and society, how state and society have developed in both the countries. And we are primarily focusing on what has happened in Pakistan. All right. So what would this mean? Domestic factors. One would be civil military relations. Civil military relations, where civilian governments have been weak and military always has been strong. Only recently governments in Pakistan have completed their full tenure, right? But most of the civilian governments in Pakistan have been thrown away by the military, or certainly have remained weaker than the military. You would also see development of civil society in Pakistan to include non-state actors which are inimical to India. So, second factor that explains the difficulty or cyclical pattern, why dialogues don't succeed, why they are disrupted by violent events, why the relationship remains difficult, is owing to domestic factors. That can simply be understood as how state and society have developed in Pakistan, whereby the most important factor that you would see is the civil military relations in Pakistan as they have developed, right? Where Pakistan always had stronger military presence and weaker civilian leadership. हिस्ट्री में यही हुआ है पाकिस्तान के, इससे अलग तो आप में से किसी को नहीं पता है ना, यही हुआ है, over the years यही हुआ है, right? So what does this mean? This means one thing. Many people say that while in the case of other states, a state has a military, in the case of Pakistan, military has a state. ये सारी चीजें जो हम कहते हैं, क्यों, इसका मतलब क्या है? इसका मतलब सिंपल है कि military has a strong hold on Pakistan's foreign policy. Military has a strong hold on Pakistan's foreign policy. So that means what? Why should military? Military क्यों होती है? Military का काम क्या है? Defense, to fight wars. So then Pakistan's military, why did it become so strong? Because now look at the nature of civilian leadership in Pakistan. Look at the nature of civilian leadership in Pakistan. One, if you compare it with India, after independence, India's leadership, for good or for bad, you like it or you don't like it, that's a different matter, right? That is your opinion. But we have a tradition of a long democratic people's movement which fought for independence under the umbrella of INC. There are different movements, but we have a major example of INC. So then India's political leadership upon independence has some connect with the people, with the masses. ऐसा नहीं कह सकते उनकी कोई जमीन नहीं है. Pakistan civilian leadership, large land owning class, nawabs, elites, who basically propagated the idea of Pakistan, but they don't have much credibility with the people. They don't have much credibility with the people. All right? Many in Pakistan leadership are also not, or also not local to what became Pakistan. They went from India. All right? So that in that context, military is the only credible institution that independent Pakistan has. Its bureaucracy is weak, its civilian leadership is weak. Military is a strong institution, most efficient institution that Pakistan inherited. So thereby, what we would see is in the 1950s itself, the military decisively intervened in the politics of Pakistan. India quickly formulated and implemented its constitution, Pakistan's constitution making process was botched up. All right, so Pakistan struggled for years to create a consensus on a constitution. In India, the idea of civilian leadership and military being subservient to civilian leadership is well established since the beginning. In Pakistan, that did not happen. So now, for various reasons, you have a military which is ascendant in Pakistan. A military's claim to power is its ability to defend the interests of Pakistan, and thereby Pakistan's military has relied on defining India as an existential threat. That is the problem. All right? क्यों भाई मिलिट्री क्यों स्ट्रांग हो इतनी मिलिट्री पावर में क्यों रहे कुछ तो क्लेम होना चाहिए उनका लीडरशिप पे सो व्हाट इज देयर क्लेम टू लीडरशिप दैट ए इंडिया इज एन एग्जिस्टेंशियल थ्रेट एंड वी आर द ओनली क्रेडिबल इंस्टीट्यूशन which can safeguard Pakistan's interest vis-a-vis India. All right. So Pakistan's military, if you want to write anything about it, you can simply write that the way state and society have developed in Pakistan, the way state and society have developed in Pakistan has an important impact on its relations with India. The way state and society have developed in Pakistan has an important impact on its relations with India. Right? Has an important impact on its relations with India. As the military, as full stop, and as the military became a dominant political player, as the military became a dominant political player, its claim to power, as the military became a prominent political player, its claim to power was based on defining India as an existential threat. Its claim to power was based on defining India as an existential threat and positioning itself, defining India as an existential threat and positioning itself as the defender of Pakistan's interests, defender of Pakistan's interest. So basically, इसका सिंपल मतलब क्या है? Pakistan's foreign policy is primarily dictated by the military. For the military, the claim to power is its ability to defend Pakistan against India. So it is their political necessity to define India as a existential threat. That is consistently what has happened. If you look at the civilian leadership, so civilian leadership mainly, even now, if you see, Pakistan has few important political parties. One is Pakistan Muslim League. Pakistan Muslim League is associated with one family, which is the Nawaz Sharif family. All right, located primarily in Punjab. You have another political party called PPP, Pakistan's People's Party, primarily associated with the Bhutto family. All right, and then now Mr. Imran Khan has Tehreek-e-Insaf Pakistan. He has created his own political party. But if you see, the Sharif family or the Bhutto family are the elites of the society. Large landowners come from a business community. So again, their ability to influence the masses is based on an appeal to certain factors, and one of the factors is criticizing India. So in that case, you can write, continue writing, even the civilian political leadership, even the civilian political leadership has found it expedient, even the civilian leadership has found it expedient or convenient, अब कुछ और लिखना चाहें तो, has found it convenient to project an anti-India, image for electoral gains, to project an anti-India image for electoral gains. And thirdly, what you can say, we have said non-state actors. Both these players, meaning both military leadership as well as civilian leadership, both these players have patronized, certain non-state actors. Both these players have patronized certain non-state actors propagating hatred towards India, right? For example, you must have heard of Mr. Hafiz Saeed. If you listen to his speeches, most of them are based on criticizing India, है ना? So this is basically a primary factor, how policy is being influenced in Pakistan. This is basically a primary factor. The way state society has developed, civil military relations, non-state actors, ascendance of military. The military has a reason to define India as an existential threat. तभी तो उनको 40% ऐसा कहा जाता है that the military in Pakistan controls 40% of its resources, military generals. Pakistan's military is very smart, especially its leadership in the context of उनको पता है किसके साथ अच्छे संबंध रखने हैं. They are very flexible, right? So for example, Mr. Imran Khan is now criticizing United States, and military always wanted to have good relations with the United States, all right, because they receive military aid. They have historically received military aid from United States. So basically all these factors can be described as domestic factors. India में भी आप देखेंगे, in India also, in some elections, Pakistan is an issue. So this is what happens. So this is the cycle which has played out. This is not to say that this is the complete reality. Many common people don't have anything to do with high politics. Most of the common people are concerned with what? Issues of day-to-day life. Employment, roti, makan, kapda, है ना? But if you define high politics, these are the factors that will come to your mind. Third factor is an interesting factor. This can be called asymmetry and search for strategic parity. Asymmetry and search for strategic parity. ये लिख लीजिए, फिर इसका मतलब समझ लेते हैं. Asymmetry and search for strategic parity. What is the meaning of this? Asymmetry and search for strategic parity. हमने पाकिस्तान के बारे में कुछ फैक्टर्स देखे थे शुरुआत में. Do you remember? What is it? What is the meaning of this then? What is asymmetry? Asymmetry can simply be thought of as inequality. Inequality in relations. Hai? What asymmetry is there? नहीं नहीं, इंडिया पाकिस्तान रिलेशंस, इंडिया पाकिस्तान रिलेशंस में क्या asymmetry है? India has a stronger military. India's demography is larger. India's economy is larger. India's geography is bigger. So across all the traditional parameters, India is larger than Pakistan. All right. So this factor plays out as a perception of asymmetry in the minds of Pakistan's policy makers. All right. So that is why you would see certain behavior of Pakistan is dictated by its constant quest. पाकिस्तान हमेशा कोशिश कर रहा है क्या करने की, कि हम कैसे बराबरी अचीव कर लें या इस असिमेट्री को एड्रेस करें. राइट. सो अगेन trying to make sense of history, what has happened. So any examples? Any examples? If you know anything about Pakistan, the choices that it has made, any examples of what Pakistan has done in order to create parity with India? Yes. Pakistan has entered into alliances very early in its history. Pakistan entered into US-led alliance. Kaha? United States, 8,000 miles away. Right? Why did Pakistan join US-based alliance? What kind of alliances did it join? It joined alliances called SEATO and CENTO, which is also Baghdad Pact. These are the alliances that first chapter, किसी को अगर interest है, first chapter of the printed material, you will find SEATO and CENTO. But these are US-led alliances, Southeast Asia Treaty Organization and Central Treaty Organization or Baghdad Pact. Pakistan joined it. Baghdad Pact is a military alliance focusing primarily on West Asia. SEATO is about Southeast Asia. So the era of Cold War, I have told you to read NCERT, Contemporary World Politics. Era of Cold War. Cold War is a period between starting 1945 and gradually developing into various phases and ending in 1991. And this is primarily characterized by competition between two superpowers. And both these superpowers are keen to expand their influence. So their military rivalry results into formation of alliances. NATO is one example of that alliance, but there are also alliances like SEATO, CENTO. These are US-led alliance. So Pakistan very early in its history became part of US-led alliances like SEATO and CENTO. SEATO, Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, CENTO, Central Treaty Organization or Baghdad Pact. Why? Because Pakistan's policy makers thought that by making these friends, Pakistan would become stronger as compared to India. This is the choice that they made. So that is one thing. Now it basically complicates the equation. Second, now you would see partnership with China. Earlier it was USA. Now you see who is the best friend of Pakistan? China. What is Pakistan's interest in having a friend in China? Again, it wants to address the asymmetry and create parity with India. Right? And then you have its choice of support to terrorism. That can also be explained by the same, in a sense, inferiority complex. Support to terrorism, where is it coming from? 1948 you could not win. 1962 you could not win, even with American arms. 1971 you are defeated. So in traditional wars you are not able to defeat India and achieve your objectives. So now terrorism becomes a low cost option. है ना? To have a military which fights war, you need to pay them salaries, you need to pay them pensions. But to a person who is part of terrorism, mainly you would recruit people who are uneducated, come from poor families. You will ideologically indoctrinate them. But they are ready to fight for you. You don't have to pay them salaries, you don't have to pay them pensions. So it's a low cost option that the Pakistan's policy establishment has adopted against India. It also has deniability, है ना? So again, this is what कि traditionally तो हम हरा नहीं पाए. In traditional wars, traditionally India is a larger military, so in traditional wars you cannot defeat India. So now you are adopting non-traditional ways of harming or inflicting harm on India. Similarly, if you see, Pakistan's literacy rate is around 59%. Pakistan is a poor country by all means. So they should be spending more on what? Health, education. ये आपकी priority होनी चाहिए. But Pakistan spent on nuclear and missile program. What is this an attempt of? There is a perceived asymmetry, that they perceive there is an asymmetry with India, and now we need to create parity. So the choice of either developing nuclear weapons or an extensive missile program also is an example of the factor of perceived or real asymmetry and search for strategic parity. कि पाकिस्तान के अंदर एक फीलिंग है कि इंडिया इज लार्जर, इंडिया इज स्ट्रॉन्गर, एंड देन द आइडिया इज दैट वी नीड टू क्रिएट इक्वालिटी विद इंडिया, पैरिटी विद इंडिया. तो हर चीज में आप कॉम्पीट करें. इंडिया कंडक्टेड 5 न्यूक्लियर टेस्ट इन 1998, पाकिस्तान कंडक्टेड 6 न्यूक्लियर टेस्ट. इंडिया से एक ज्यादा करेंगे. ऑल राइट. So that is basically what is happening. That is the pattern that you would see in history, right? So again, understand, this is a way of making sense of what has happened in history. और वो हमको क्या बता रहा है, हमारा इतिहास जो है हमको क्या बता रहा है, क्या पैटर्न हम देख सकते हैं, कैसे समझ सकते हैं इस रिलेशनशिप को. और हम अभी क्या समझ रहे हैं, what are we trying to understand? We are trying to understand the most important factors which keep this relationship difficult. Till Pakistan continues to compete with India, and Pakistan continues to view India as an existential threat and continues to base its policy on competition, on acquiring nuclear weapons or missiles, you can't think of peace and normalcy. और इन सब को कंबाइन कर दें तो एक चौथा फैक्टर है, वो क्या है? Fourth factor, it's an important factor. Again, what did we say? That Pakistan is geostrategically significant in terms of its location. Did we say that? So now Pakistan, why Pakistan would be supported by a China or a United States? उनको भी तो कुछ चाहिए. So Pakistan's location has been attractive to many important powers. Earlier United States, now China. All right. So thereby, role of external actors, external actors also complicates the matter. Role of external actors, right? For example, earlier consistently USA, now China. Understand this in a simple way. Since 2008, India had adopted a policy that it would make an attempt to diplomatically isolate Pakistan on the question of terrorism. What is it that India wants regarding Pakistan? ये तो बड़ा आसान हो जाएगा टीवी चैनल की डिबेट शुरू करना और यूट्यूब वीडियो बनाने का उनका थंबनेल और टाइटल लिखने के लिए कि भाई हम डिस्ट्रॉय करना चाहते हैं पाकिस्तान को. बट इन सिंपल फॉरेन पॉलिसी टर्म्स, पाकिस्तान, वी सी पाकिस्तान एज अ कंट्री विच इज हार्मिंग आवर इंटरेस्ट, सो इट्स बिहेवियर इज detrimental to us. We want to change the behavior of Pakistan. How do you change the behavior of Pakistan? What are the tools which are available to you? Either by hard power or by soft power, either by coercion or persuasion. Persuasion as it is difficult because there is a lot of mistrust. Hard power is also limited because Pakistan has nuclear weapons, right? We may expect that someday Pakistan has a government which focuses on poverty, unemployment, etc., so that peace would come, but that is not in our hands. So we also then need the support of international community to isolate Pakistan. But Pakistan cannot be isolated or cannot be deterred until we can ensure that it doesn't have strong backers, supporters. हम पाकिस्तान को आइसोलेट नहीं कर पाएंगे अगर यूएस उसका सपोर्ट करता रहे या चाइना उसको सपोर्ट करे इकोनॉमिकली या मिलिटरीली. So that has complicated the relationship. Pakistan's location has been attractive over the years to important powers such as United States and in recent times China. Pakistan's location has been attractive. Pakistan's location has been attractive. Pakistan's location has been attractive to important powers such as the United States, to important powers such as the United States, and in more recent times China, and in more recent times China, and in more recent times China, thereby complicating the equations, is the role of external actors, in India-Pakistan relations, or in these relations, or in India-Pakistan relations ही लिख लें, in India-Pakistan relations. So simple idea ये है that directly or indirectly you are not only dealing with Pakistan, but you are also dealing with other powers. That complicates the politics of it, and that is how naked international relations is. You don't have any permanent friends or permanent enemies. You only have permanent interests. है ना? यूएस को जब काम पड़ा तो उसने पाकिस्तान का इस्तेमाल किया, बदले में उसने क्या किया? इंडिया को क्रिटिसाइज किया, इंडिया पे प्रेशर पुट किया हिस्टोरिकली, राइट? चाइना पाकिस्तान का इस्तेमाल कर रहा है अब. पाकिस्तान का जो कोस्ट है चाइना को बहुत पसंद है. क्यों? बिकॉज चाइना इज नॉट एन इंडियन ओशन कंट्री. सो पाकिस्तान प्रोवाइड्स इट अ शॉर्टर रूट टू इंडियन ओशन. पाकिस्तान का पैसा नहीं चाहिए, पैसा तो ले ही लेंगे, बट लोकेशन इज मोर इंपॉर्टेंट. ऑलराइट, एंड व्हाई पाकिस्तान इज सो विलिंग to be subservient to these powers? Because it gives us its strength against India. तो क्या होता है? Fourthly हम देख सकते हैं, इसीलिए even though we don't want it, India's position is very simple. In India-Pakistan issues, there is no role for any third or external actor. But if we look at practically, indirectly, we ultimately see a third actor playing an important role. जैसे for the last at least 2 years, it has been written by many that India and Pakistan are holding some sort of negotiation with the mediation of UAE. ऐसा सुनने में आ रहा है. दोनों गवर्नमेंट्स ने अभी एक्सेप्ट नहीं किया, लेकिन ऐसा सुनने में आ रहा है that with the help of UAE, with the mediation of UAE, India and Pakistan may be talking. All right. So basically, what have we learned so far? We have learned, to start with, basically how to look at Pakistan, what you should remember, right? Why is it significant? Secondly, we have seen that Pakistan has to be put in perspective. Don't get obsessed with Pakistan. think of it as a country which is ultimately weaker as compared to India. So that would give you some sense of its behavior. And then we understood what has been the nature of this relationship, difficult and challenging. And we understood over the years, historically, if we look at different years, different decades, we will find a pattern of dialogue, disruption, and dialogue. You all are aware of these examples. And then we see that this difficulty and challenge, as well as the cyclical pattern, why dialogues don't succeed, why there is periodic violence, either war or terrorism in India-Pakistan relations. So we see that it can be explained by many things, but there are four major factors which can be called structural factors, factors which are difficult to change. First factor is difference in political and historical narrative between India and Pakistan. There remains a large gap between India and Pakistan on historical and political issues. For example, हमने क्या example दिए? Two nation theory, which is the basis of the existence of Pakistan, for the existence of Pakistan, and India does not accept it. India can't accept it. Secondly, India believes in unity and diversity. So India has a different model, different way of looking at relations between religions and communities. Pakistan was created in the name of religion and then has basically had so far a confused existence. Kya hai hum? So Pakistan's national identity sometimes is very reductionist. It defines itself separate from India. ज़्यादातर समय गया उनका कैसे इंडिया से अपने को अलग दिखाने में. अलग तो बहुत ज्यादा है नहीं, अलग दिखाने में लेकिन समय गया है. So this is the narrative, right? So that is what is reflected in the education system, the way history is taught. That is what is reflected when political positions are taken on questions like Jammu and Kashmir, right? Secondly, domestic factors. What is domestic factor? Development of state and society. जैसे state and society develop हुआ है, उसका क्या feature है? Civil military relations. We see weak civilian leadership, strong military leadership. Strong military means that the claim to power of military has been based on portraying India, defining India as an existential threat. And even civilian leadership has found it expedient to criticize India, adopt an anti-India stance to win votes. And then both of them have patronized such groups which are inimical to India, right? And thirdly, what factor did we talk about? There is an perceived or real asymmetry in Pakistan's mind, and there is always an attempt to gain parity with India. So this perceived asymmetry on part of Pakistan's policy establishment has led to Pakistan making such choices which have complicated the relations. One is it entering into alliances like US-led alliances very early on in its history, and now developing close relations with China. Another is, despite the poverty and limitations of its economy, developing nuclear weapons. Another is, in the face of defeat in traditional wars, adopting a low-cost tactics of promoting terrorism against India. Now, अगर हमको पाकिस्तान से कोई नाराजगी है तो यही है ना कि इसके अलावा भी कुछ है. रिलीजन का झगड़ा जिनको बनाना बना लीजिए आप लोग, आपकी मर्जी है, पर अल्टीमेटली वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट अ स्टेट which is harming our interest. All right, and then we have the role of external actors. So even when India makes best of efforts of isolating Pakistan or coercing Pakistan or persuading Pakistan, Pakistan's behavior is encouraged by the fact that its location has been attractive to important powers. So thereby Pakistan has been successful in soliciting the support of these external powers to its interest, right? So that is what basically encourages Pakistan to have, हमारे perspective से क्या, to have an continuous irresponsible conduct. All right, Pakistan का conduct हम क्या कहते हैं, is irresponsible. This is not a responsible state. That is what we are saying. Right? Some people would say that it is a failed state. It should be declared a failed state. Whatever. There are various opinions in India about Pakistan. The degree of difference only lies in the fact that आप कौन सी language इस्तेमाल करना चाहेंगे. Right? आप कैसी but majorly there is a certain degree of dissatisfaction with Pakistan's behavior. That is basically the main problem. So ये हो गया history. हमने तय कर ली in the printed material. In the printed material, first few pages are history only. And this is what has happened. Now what are we going to talk about after the break? So here is a break of बहुत सारे लोगों ने ले लिया जिनको जो बैठे रहे उनके लिए. You have 5 minutes of break. Break. Or if you have any issues, questions, problems, after the break, the first thing is that we will take up those issues or problems. Please come back to the class, take your seats. For those who may be interested, page number 57 of the printed material is where Pakistan starts. Page number 57. As I said, first few parts are history, important events and important terms which have been mentioned. उसके बाद क्या है? Framework जो हमने बात की और उसके बाद क्या है? Issues के बारे में बात करेंगे. है ना? सो प्रिंटेड मटेरियल थोड़ा देख लेंगे तो स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ लेक्चर्स समझने में आसानी हो जाएगी. इफ यू सिंपली लुक एट द प्रिंटेड मटेरियल. Ananya Das asks the question, how is Pakistan's location attractive to US and China? Good. So when you ask these kinds of questions, it is helpful. है ना? So the answer is very simple. For China today, Pakistan's location is attractive. मैंने क्लास के बीच में ये बोला था, अगर आपने ध्यान दिया होता. Pakistan is attractive because China is a large country. Most of its population is concentrated on its eastern coast. But it has important provinces like Xinjiang on the west which are landlocked. China का अगर मैप देखोगे, China's coast is towards the east, which is the Pacific coast. But China is a very large country. So Tibet, Xinjiang, these are mountainous regions falling towards Central Asia. These are landlocked. बहुत आसान नहीं है इनके लिए 4000 मील दूर जाके पैसिफिक को एक्सेस करना. So if China wants to develop these regions, China wants to access Indian Ocean. China does not have any direct access to Indian Ocean. So Pakistan then, if it can build connectivity through Pakistan, it has a shorter route to Indian Ocean. In simple terms, very simple terms, Pakistan is attractive to China because it provides it a shorter access to the Indian Ocean. है ना? For US, initially 1950s, 60s, 70s, Pakistan's location was attractive to US for two reasons. One, Pakistan was prominently located in the Indian Ocean region. Pakistan bordered Afghanistan. Afghanistan bordered USSR. All right. So in its competition or fight with the USSR, a country like Pakistan, which is located in the Indian Ocean coast, is important. And it shares a border with Afghanistan, which shares a border with USSR. So it basically creates proximity to USSR. It provides US a better reach towards USSR. All right. Secondly, Pakistan gradually played a role of mediatory between China and United States. United States ने चाइना से दोस्ती कर ली थी 1970s में. Pakistan shared territory with China. One, and two, Pakistan developed good relations with China. It had good relations with USA. So it played a sort of messenger between China and the United States. हर कोई अपने इंटरेस्ट के लिए काम कर रहा है. उसके बाद 1979, USSR invaded Afghanistan, sent forces to Afghanistan. अब समझ में आ गया कि अफगानिस्तान क्यों इंपॉर्टेंट है. USSR shares border with Afghanistan. Afghanistan becomes unstable. USSR sends troops. Russia sends troops to Afghanistan. Pakistan borders Afghanistan. Pakistan is an ally of US, and now US starts funding those fighting against USSR in Afghanistan through Pakistan. पाकिस्तान के जरिए पैसा और हथियार प्रोवाइड करने लगा यूएसए किनको, जो अफगानिस्तान में यूएसएसआर से लड़ रहे थे. सो यूज है कि नहीं है. 2001 यूएसए लॉन्च्ड अ वॉर अगेंस्ट टेररिज्म. यूएसए लॉन्च्ड अ वॉर अगेंस्ट टेररिज्म. सबसे पहले कहां यूएस ने मिलिट्री ऑपरेशन शुरू किया? अफगानिस्तान. सो इन मेंटेनिंग सप्लाई लाइंस टू द यूएस ट्रूप्स fighting in Afghanistan, Pakistan's location was important for the US. इसलिए ये अट्रैक्टिव लोकेशन है पाकिस्तान की कि ये वेस्ट एशिया और साउथ एशिया के बीच में है. अफगानिस्तान और सेंट्रल एशिया को भी रास्ता प्रोवाइड करता है, और इंडियन ओशन में इसका कोस्ट भी है, इंक्लूडिंग 2 इंपॉर्टेंट पोर्ट्स, है ना. सो लोकेशन का ये इस्तेमाल है, राइट. सो नाउ वी आर गोइंग टू लुक एट द इश्यूज बिटवीन इंडिया एंड पाकिस्तान. सो मेनली वी हैव अंडरस्टूड दैट दिस इज अ डिफिकल्ट रिलेशनशिप. So in this relationship, what are the issues which dominate news cycle or which likely give rise to questions in the examination? क्या कौन से मुद्दे हैं ऐसे जो लगातार या तो न्यूज में रहते हैं या फंडामेंटल है या क्वेश्चन जिनसे आ सकते हैं? So you identify few issues. One is इंडिया की फॉरेन पॉलिसी को समझना है तो थोड़ा थोड़ा ये देखना पड़ेगा. जब आप लगातार अखबार पढ़ रहे हैं ना, आपको अपने आप समझ में आ जाएगा. व्हाट इज इंडियाज प्राइमरी प्रॉब्लम विद पाकिस्तान? प्रमोशन ऑफ टेररिज्म. कोई भी अखबार पढ़ रहे हैं आपको ये बात समझ में आ जाएगी. मई के मंथ में हिंदू पढ़ रहे थे. इन द मंथ ऑफ मे वर देयर आर्टिकल्स ऑन पाकिस्तान? नहीं. सुहासिनी हैदर वॉज राइटिंग ऑन पाकिस्तान, है ना. 2-3 आर्टिकल थे पाकिस्तान पे मई में द हिंदू के अंदर. अभी कुछ दिन पहले हिंदू में कुछ छपा था पाकिस्तान के बारे में, अबाउट एफएटीएफ तो ठीक है, अबाउट ट्रायल ऑफ मुंबई टेररिस्ट अटैक्स इन पाकिस्तान कोर्ट्स. 3 दिन पहले था, न्यूज में था ना. ठीक है. तो आई एम एक्सपेक्टिंग दैट यू आर एटलीस्ट मेकिंग एन अटेम्प्ट टू रीड न्यूज़पेपर. I am expecting that you are trying to do that. I have told you in the first class, expertise is not required. Awareness is required. But that awareness alone is not going to do much. So what is required? You provide it a structure. Structure, knowledge को structure देना है. वो हम क्लास में करने की कोशिश करते हैं. So if you have read anything, what would happen? It would become easier for you to ask questions. सवाल पूछना आपके लिए आसान हो जाएगा. अगर आप केवल प्रिंटेड मटेरियल ही पढ़ के आ जाएं क्लास से पहले, तो आपको फ्लो अपने आप समझ में आ जाएगा. साथ में यू वुड हैव क्वेश्चंस अबाउट दिस इज व्हाट हैज बीन रिटन, व्हाट इज द मीनिंग ऑफ इट, राइट. द अदर इशू इज इन दिस रिलेशनशिप दैट इज ऑफ्टन टॉक्ड अबाउट इज द इशू ऑफ कश्मीर. सो व्हेन यू सी व्हाट इज इट दैट पाकिस्तान सेज इज द प्राइमरी इशू, India says we will first talk about terrorism. What Pakistan says? we should first talk about Kashmir. All right. Third, we can club all the other issues under one terminology, which is called normalization. What is normalization? In the context of India-Pakistan relations, नॉर्मलाइजेशन, कुछ लोगों के अंदर एबिलिटी होती है साथ साथ लिखने की, ऐसे भी स्टूडेंट्स होते हैं जो साथ साथ लिख लेते हैं. नॉर्मलाइजेशन इज द प्रोसेस ऑफ improving relations. Normalization is the process of improving relations by resolving outstanding issues in a step-by-step manner. All right, normalization is the process of improving relations. Improving relations, जो स्पीड है आप लोगों की बहुत ही बढ़िया है. Improving relations by resolving outstanding issues in a step-by-step manner. देखो, क्लास के अंदर तो आप कह सकते हो कि मैं धीरे हो जाऊं, आप के साथ चलूं. एग्जामिनेशन हॉल में नहीं कह पाओगे. एंड द मेजर प्रॉब्लम दैट पीपल फेस इन द एग्जामिनेशन हॉल इज व्हाट? मुझे तो आता था, क्वेश्चन छूट गया, टेस्ट पेपर पूरा नहीं हो रहा है. सो एवरीथिंग स्टार्ट्स हियर. Normalization is the process of improving relations by resolving outstanding issues in a step-by-step manner. So basically, what issues would come under this? All the other issues. India-Pakistan relations have been dominated by either issues of security or issues of territory. These are the dominant issues. All right? All the other issues have not been paid that much of an attention. So thereby, if we see major issues, either they arise out of Indus Water Treaty 1960, or these are the issues which are called low hanging fruits. Can anyone reading the newspaper tell me what are low hanging fruits? पढ़ा है, इसीलिए मैंने कहा मई के महीने में आप अखबार पढ़ रहे थे. जब आप अखबार पढ़ रहे हो तो अक्सर इस तरह के टर्म्स लिखे हुए दिखते हैं. In India-Pakistan relations, two issues are territorial issues are called low hanging fruits. One is Siachen and another is Sir Creek. Siachen and Sir Creek. ये issues हैं. और फिर उसके बाद all the other issues. For example, थोड़ा सा ट्रेड के बारे में जान लेना चाहिए, है ना? In other relations it becomes easier to teach क्योंकि you have what are the diplomatic relations, what are political relations, what are economic relations, what are defense relations. In this relationship, the relationship remains as yet to be normalized. This is what we are seeking, right? So that's why all the other issues become subservient to it. And उसके बाद current affairs cycle में कुछ चल रहा था क्या in recent times, that becomes important. So for example, एक इशू चला द कुलभूषण जाधव केस. और क्या हुआ? और कुछ हुआ? करतारपुर कॉरिडोर. और क्या हुआ? और क्या हुआ भाई? करतारपुर कॉरिडोर हुआ. और भी कुछ हुआ? चेंजिंग गवर्नमेंट्स इन पाकिस्तान, यही सब आता है ना न्यूज साइकिल में. तो कुछ चीजें हमको पढ़नी है, कुछ चीजें इंपॉर्टेंट हैं. ये दो चीजें याद रखो. यूपीएससी के एग्जामिनेशन में ये लालच नहीं होना चाहिए कि मैं हर चीज का एक्सपर्ट बन जाऊं. मुझे हर चीज आएगी तभी मैं एग्जाम दूंगा. क्यों? क्योंकि टॉपर कितना स्कोर करता है? 52%, 50%. ये स्कोर किसका होता है? टॉपर का. आई एम होपिंग इन कॉलेज यू स्कोर्ड मोर देन 50%. तो दैट इज बेसिकली व्हाट इज इंपॉर्टेंट. यू रीड एवरीथिंग but you focus on important things. है ना. यूपीएससी एग्जामिनेशन का प्रिपरेशन सब कुछ जान लूंगा मैं आज का प्रोसेस नहीं है. ऑलराइट, बिकॉज इट वुड टेक टाइम. नाउ सो ये न्यूज में रहा है. इसके बाद हम क्या देख सकते हैं, एक्सटर्नल एक्टर्स थोड़ा सा देख सकते हैं. एक्सटर्नल एक्टर्स, व्हाट हैज हैपेंड सो फार. फॉर एग्जांपल यहां से हम देख सकते हैं चाइना सीपीईसी. यूपीएससी हैज आस्क्ड क्वेश्चन ऑन चाइना सीपीईसी. और फिर हम क्या कर सकते हैं, वी कैन क्रिएट अ फ्रेमवर्क फॉर मैनेजिंग रिलेशंस. वी नो दैट दिस इज डिफिकल्ट रिलेशन. हाउ शुड वी डील विथ पाकिस्तान. ये हमारा आइडिया होना चाहिए कि हमने शुरुआत की रिलेशनशिप का एक फ्रेमवर्क बनाने के लिए. नेचर एंड पैटर्न एंड इट्स रीजंस, व्हाट आर द इंपॉर्टेंट फैक्टर्स. उसके बाद हम आ गए इश्यूज, व्हाट आर द आउटस्टैंडिंग इश्यूज इन दिस रिलेशनशिप, मेजर वंस, and then the issues about which we should be aware, and then there are certain things which are going on in the current affairs cycle, so we should keep an eye on that. And then the role of external actors, so in this context China's role has been important, and with China is associated the idea of CPEC, China Pakistan Economic Corridor. और ये पूरा करने के बाद हम we have to create a framework for managing these relations. Solve नहीं कर पाएंगे आप इंडिया पाकिस्तान के इश्यूज. Nobody is asking you to solve the issues. The expectation is that you are aware of these issues. और FATF, ऑब्सेशन की जरूरत नहीं है. FATF से ऑब्सेस हो गए कि FATF में हम ये कर देंगे, हम वो कर देंगे. नहीं, आप कुछ नहीं कर पाएंगे FATF पे. What is FATF? What does it do? How does it reach to a decision? How many members are there? Where is it located? ये यूपीएससी पूछेगा आपसे, है ना. ये यूपीएससी आपसे पूछेगा. ये नहीं पूछेगा क्या नेगोशिएशन हुआ अंदर, क्योंकि वो बाहर किसी को पता नहीं है. राइट. सो दैट इज समथिंग दैट यू शुड कीप इन माइंड. कोई इशू है तो उसका बेसिक्स क्या है. सो वेयर शुड वी स्टार्ट. वी आर गोइंग टू स्टार्ट विद दीज इश्यूज. वी विल फर्स्ट लुक एट द इशू ऑफ टेररिज्म. अब किसी भी इशू को डिस्कस करने के लिए, व्हेन वी आर डिस्कसिंग एनी पर्टिकुलर इशू, व्हाट वी कैन डू इज, द बेस्ट वे कैन बी, वी मेक अ क्वेश्चन आउट ऑफ इट. What do we do? We make a question out of it, because ultimately whatever you are learning, the purpose is to write answers to questions. Issues would lead to questions and you have to write answers to those questions. So एक simple question बना लेते हैं. Discuss the key aspects of terrorism as an issue. Terrorism as an issue in India, Pakistan relations. Terrorism as an issue in India, Pakistan relations. Simple question, एक लाइन का. Discuss the key aspects of terrorism as an issue in India-Pakistan relations. When you look at any question in the examination, don't get obsessed by it. Don't think, वाह क्या question पूछा, मैं तो इसका आंसर दे नहीं सकता. Because most of the people would discuss the most difficult question and say कि ये तो एग्जाम कितना मुश्किल है. एग्जाम मुश्किल है, इसलिए मुश्किल है. Why is it difficult? भाई, for 900 seats, if 500,000 students are writing the examination, that examination becomes difficult. That is the difficulty. The difficulty is not the content. Content सबको पता है. Difficulty is that there are number of people like you who are writing the examination. So how do you create edge? How do you differentiate yourself? So your handwriting plays an important role. Right? Your handwriting would play an important role. Any examiner would appreciate if you make their life easier. If it is easy for me to read, I would highly appreciate you, because I may have different problems in my life. I don't want problem in your copy. I should be able to see. So that the determination comes from the question. What do you have to do? You have to discuss keyword हो गया, right? What you have to discuss key aspects. थोड़ा सा vague हो गया, but we understand key aspects. Meaning at least we should be able to structure our answer in such a way that as comprehensively as possible, different dimensions are touched upon in the answer. And what is the issue that has to be discussed? Terrorism. Where? In India-Pakistan relations. Of course, in the examination, Korea-Pakistan relations question nahi aata hai. Right? So, ye to obvious hai. Right? So, where now here you have to make the determination. A, what is India's concern? B, what is India's approach? What are the steps that have been taken by India? And what more can be done? अपने दिमाग में ऐसा एक स्ट्रक्चर मैंने बना लिया, आप अपने हिसाब से ही बना सकते हैं. यही करना है आपको किसी भी सवाल का जवाब देने में कि भाई एक लाइन का सवाल है, मैं इसमें क्या लिखने जा रहा हूं. की एस्पेक्ट्स एड्रेस करने हैं. की एस्पेक्ट्स एड्रेस करना है तो मैं क्या करूंगा? व्हाट विल आई डू? आई विल थिंक ऑफ इंडिया, राइट? व्हाट इज इंडियाज प्रॉब्लम इन दिस कॉन्टेक्स्ट? What is India's concern? What is India's approach? What is it that India wants? What is it that India wants? What steps has India taken? There are certain things that India can do. There are certain things that India wants. There are certain things that India can do. So what are the things that India has done? What are the steps which have been taken? And then since, has this problem ended? Has there been a final solution to this problem? No. So then there is obviously a scope for suggestions, improvement. What has to be done? So try and break down any proposition. आपका भी अगर कोई problem है तो उसको इस एक लाइन से इन 4 पॉइंट्स तक पहुंचाने की कोशिश कीजिए. What is it that you want? Right? Now, let's start writing. So dictation has a role in class. जहां जरूरत होती है वहां करते हैं. Otherwise it's very easy for me. मैं कुर्सी पे बैठ जाऊं और पूरे 3 घंटे लिखाता रहूं आपको, है ना? कुछ देखने की जरूरत नहीं है मुझे. राइट. सो हाउ वुड यू राइट दिस? सो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल यू कैन, पीपल आस्क हाउ डू वी स्टार्ट एन आंसर इन IR? एनी आंसर हैज टू बी स्टार्टेड इन द कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ द क्वेश्चन. ऐसा नहीं है कि IR में अलग तरीके से शुरू करेंगे. हर सब्जेक्ट के अंदर आप क्या कर रहे हैं? क्वेश्चन का आंसर कर रहे हैं. बिना क्वेश्चन के आप हाइपोथेटिकल प्रपोजिशन बना रहे हैं कि कैसे करेंगे, ये मुश्किल आ रही है. सो व्हाट इज दिस क्वेश्चन सेइंग? इट इज गिविंग यू सम आइडिया इंडिया पाकिस्तान रिलेशंस. यू कैन स्टार्ट विद बैकग्राउंड ऑफ इंडिया पाकिस्तान रिलेशंस. You can start with any current event. You can start with any current event. You can start with the definition of terrorism. इतने तरीके होते हैं शुरू करने के, है ना? But you have to make a consideration that word limit is a reality. Time limit is a reality. So when we write in class, we will be slightly lengthy, that we cover every aspect. When you write an answer, you condense it. इसीलिए हम प्रैक्टिस करते हैं. दैट इज वाई वी प्रैक्टिस. नोबडी राइट्स अ गुड आंसर इन वन डे. राइट. सो स्टार्ट राइटिंग प्लीज. पेन्स टू द पेपर. टेररिज्म रिमेन्स. टेररिज्म रिमेन्स the most important concern. Terrorism remains the most important concern for India in its relation with Pakistan. Terrorism remains the most important concern for India in its relation with Pakistan. A general proposition ऐसे भी शुरू कर सकते हैं अगर कुछ समझ में नहीं आ रहा है तो. That is what I am trying to arrive at. All right, that डोंट गेट स्टक अपने दिमाग में ही, लिखना शुरू करेंगे, लिखना अपने आप आ जाएगा. सो टेररिज्म रिमेन्स द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट कंसर्न फॉर इंडिया इन इट्स रिलेशन विद पाकिस्तान. नाउ यू हैव टू थिंक ऑफ एनी कॉन्क्रीट वेज इन विच इंडिया conveys this problem. Are you aware of any phrases that you would always find in the context of terrorism that in India's statements? UN Security Council. ब्लीड इंडिया विद 1000 कट्स. ये तो मुझे पता है कि ये सबको पता होगा कि ब्लीड इंडिया विद 1000 कट्स है ना, मतलब बहुत ही ऐसा साउंड करता है कोई फिल्मी कहानी हो. करेक्ट है वो पाकिस्तान का अप्रोच. लेट्स राइट the use of cross-border terrorism as an instrument of state policy by Pakistan. The use of terrorism, cross-border terrorism, the use of cross-border terrorism as an instrument of state policy by Pakistan. The use of cross-border terrorism as an instrument of state policy by Pakistan has been consistently flagged by India. So when you are writing, just understand this, when you are writing, there are certain phrases which are important. If you read any statements, here to any official statements, how do we define terrorism? That it is emanating from across the border. Pakistan is using its soil to promote anti-India activities, right? So cross-border terrorism as an instrument of state policy. इस तरह के phrases को हम क्या करते हैं? Underline कर देते हैं. सब कुछ underline नहीं करते हैं, है ना? Cross-border terrorism as an instrument of state policy. क्या करते हैं इसको? Highlight करते हैं. ये है phrases जो बेसिकली आपके आंसर को क्या करता है? डिफरेंशिएट करता है. अदरवाइज एवरीबडी कैन राइट अ स्टोरी. ऑल राइट, नाउ द सेकेंड कंसर्न इज, हमने क्या डिफाइन कर दिया? कंसर्न, इंडिया का कंसर्न हमने डिफाइन कर दिया, है ना, एज ब्रीफली एज पॉसिबल. सो दैट इज द रोल ऑफ इंट्रोडक्शन. क्विकली मूव ऑन. Secondly, what is India's approach? What approach has India taken? What is it that India wants from Pakistan? Specifically from Pakistan, what is it that India wants? No terrorism. Peaceful and stable relations. Please write. India has consistently asked Pakistan to take concrete, irreversible, and verifiable steps. India has consistently asked Pakistan to take concrete, irreversible, and verifiable steps against terrorist groups, individuals, as well as terror financing network and infrastructure, as well as terror financing networks, and infrastructure. तो नो टेररिज्म या पीसफुल स्टेबल रिलेशंस लिखने के बजाय हमने क्या किया, इसको ओपन अप कर दिया. क्या एक्शन, कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव एक्शन क्या है टेररिज्म के खिलाफ? व्हाट इज द कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव एक्शन? इफ एक्शन इज टेकन which is in the first case concrete, demonstrable, irreversible, कि आज किया और कल फिर से शुरू हो गया. आज हमने दिखा दिया दुकान बंद लेकिन पीछे से शटर खुल गया, वो नहीं. irreversible and verifiable, which can be verified. Action against what kind of actors, what kind of activities? Terrorist groups, terrorist individuals, terror financing network, as well as terror infrastructure. Various elements of terrorism. Various elements of terrorism. है ना कि भाई हमने ग्रुप को बैन कर दिया लेकिन वो इंडिविजुअल कर रहा है. नहीं, ऐसा नहीं. इंडिविजुअल पे भी, ग्रुप पे भी, टेररिस्ट इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पे भी, टेरर फाइनेंसिंग नेटवर्क पे भी. दिस इज द कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव एक्शन दैट इंडिया wants. All right. Now, are we satisfied with Pakistan's actions? India has demanded that the trials of those responsible for the Mumbai terrorist attacks, that the trial of those responsible for the Mumbai terrorist attacks 2008 be expedited in Pakistan's courts. However, Pakistan's response has been dissatisfactory. In this context, the following steps have been taken by India. Following steps have been taken by India to counter the threat of terrorism. अभी आप क्या करेंगे, नंबर्स डालेंगे, ABCD लिखेंगे, जो जैसे भी लिखना है. तो थोड़ा सा मैं आपको एक स्ट्रक्चर भी बता रहा हूं, कोशिश कर रहा हूं कि कैसे आप लिखेंगे. अभी तक तो आप इंट्रोडक्शन में ही थे, है ना. इसको आप छोटा कर सकते हैं. What are the steps that India has taken? Now, how do you think about it? हमने कुछ सीखा है पहले लेक्चर में. What kind of steps are we thinking of? Diplomatic, economic, military. जो सोच रहे हैं ऑर्गेनाइज करना है अपने थिंकिंग को. When you have to organize your thinking, you can think of diplomatic, military, and economic steps. So, diplomatically, first, India has raised the issue bilaterally. Diplomatically, India has raised the issue bilaterally with Pakistan. furthermore, full stop, furthermore, India has sought to diplomatically, number one, India has raised the issue bilaterally with Pakistan. Number two, उसी diplomatically में ही, what has India done? India has sought to diplomatically isolate Pakistan. India has sought to diplomatically isolate Pakistan. India has sought to diplomatically isolate Pakistan. Internationally, India has sought to diplomatically isolate Pakistan internationally by working with countries like the United States or the US, आप लिख सकते हैं, by working with countries like the US, and France. Bilaterally, as well as at important international forums, bilaterally as well as important international forums such as the FATF, bilaterally as well as at important forums, international forums such as the FATF. So जब भी हम किसी से बात करते हैं, whenever there is a visit, when we are talking with US or France, you would generally find at the end of the visit there is a joint statement. In that joint statement, you will find either the issue of terrorism is mentioned or Pakistan is directly mentioned. That is what we are saying. At FATF, also directly or indirectly, we try and impress upon others that Pakistan's role in promoting terrorism should be called out. Right? Now, the second thing, economically, what have we done? On the economic front, India revoked on the economic front, India revoked the most favored nation MFN status. India revoked the MFN status, most favored nation status. Accorded to Pakistan in 2019. On the economic front, India revoked the most favored nation or MFN status accorded to Pakistan in 2019. In the same year, India increased import duties. In the same year, India increased the import duties on products from Pakistan. India increased the import duties on products from Pakistan. Furthermore, India announced the full utilization of, India announced the full utilization of its share of water. Furthermore, India announced the full utilization of its share of water, from the western rivers, its share of water from the western rivers mentioned in the Indus Water Treaty. From the western rivers mentioned in the Indus Water Treaty. Remember, economic options are few when it comes to Pakistan. We have very low trade with Pakistan, so our trade dependence is not there, so economic options are very few. So these are some of the steps that the government of India took. Now on the military front, what is it that the government did? Militarily, India conducted raids on terrorist locations across the LOC, terrorist location across the LOC, line of control, across the LOC, also known as the surgical strikes. India conducted raids on terrorist locations across the LOC, also known as the surgical strikes, in the year 2016. In the year 2016. In 2019, India conducted, what is it that India conducted in 2019? Preemptive. India conducted preemptive, non-military airstrikes, on terrorist infrastructure, in Pakistan. So एयर स्ट्राइक आप सबको पता है, आप सबने कह दिया, बालाकोट एयर स्ट्राइक भी कहते हैं उसको, है ना, बालाकोट एयर स्ट्राइक कैन आल्सो बी यूज्ड. बट द मॉर्निंग of the air strike, the foreign secretary, who was the foreign secretary at that point in time? S. Jaishankar. Mr. Vijay Gokhale, Ambassador Vijay Gokhale was the foreign secretary. He had conducted a press conference in which he said that India has conducted preemptive, meaning we had prior information that other terrorist attacks are imminent. So in order to prevent them, we have conducted preemptive, non-military. We have not struck at military installations, airstrikes. Meaning India defined it in terms of self-defense. है ना? So that is what the foreign secretary said. आप लोग क्या है, मिलिट्री के हिसाब से सोच रहे हैं, है ना? सिविल सर्विसेज में जाना है, लेकिन सोचना कैसे है? मिलिट्री के हिसाब से. तो इसीलिए ध्यान नहीं देना है कि what the foreign secretary said, right? Everybody is attracted by the military. Everybody is interested in knowing about the bombs, the planes. But ultimately, all of you are going to be paper pushers. कागजी काम करना है आपको ज्यादा, लिखना पढ़ना, right? So preemptive, non-military airstrike. Non-military का मतलब है पाकिस्तान को बता रहे हैं कि हमको war नहीं चाहिए. We don't want war. We have not struck at military facilities. वी हैव स्ट्रक एट टेररिस्ट कैंप्स, ये मतलब है इसका, राइट? नाउ अब क्या बच गया? मिलिट्री कर लिया हमने, अब क्या बच गया? और भी कोई जानता है स्पेशल मिलिट्री ऑपरेशन हुआ, बता दो। ये सारी चीजें लोग ज्यादा पढ़ते हैं ना, व्हाट मिस्टर अजीत डोवाल डज और व्हाट रॉ डज, ये ज्यादा पता होता है स्टूडेंट्स को, टीचर को कम पता होता है। अब बचता है आगे क्या कर सकते हैं। हैज द ऑब्जेक्टिव बीन अचीव्ड? नो, वी स्टिल आर लुकिंग फॉर action against those involved in Mumbai terrorist attacks, those involved in Pulwama terrorist attacks, etc. Now, so then we need to go forward. So way forward कैसे लिखते हैं? Way forward is about what can you identify as additions to what has already happened. First of all, it does not mean what has already happened is not satisfactory, because the government knows more than you. Professionals are there in the government who have this job. It means that you acknowledge what has already happened because you are students, and then you are able to add to it on the basis of again your reading. So क्या किया जा सकता है? Dealing with terrorism, अगला सेक्शन, डीलिंग विद टेररिज्म, वे फॉरवर्ड अगर आप टाइटल डालना चाहते हैं डाल सकते हैं, डीलिंग विद टेररिज्म, वी आर आंसरिंग दिस क्वेश्चन। डीलिंग विद टेररिज्म remains a continuing process. Dealing with terrorism remains a continuing process. Which requires concerted efforts and multi-pronged approach, which requires concerted efforts and a multi-pronged approach. Concerted efforts and a multi-pronged approach. In this context, the following can be suggested. In this context, the following can be suggested. Concerted efforts and multi-pronged approach. In this context, the following can be suggested. 1. Strengthening border security and vigilance at the LOC Strengthening border security and vigilance at the LOC is much needed. To prevent infiltration from across the border or from Pakistan. Infiltration from Pakistan. पहले हमने क्या किया, बॉर्डर को सिक्योर करना, एलओसी पे विजिल बनाए रखना जरूरी है, ये करना चाहिए। सेकंड स्ट्रेंथनिंग इंटेलिजेंस apparatus to obtain timely and actionable information on terror activities. Timely and actionable information on terror activities is much needed. thirdly, the infusion of technology, to strengthen both border security and intelligence. The infusion of technology to strengthen both border security and intelligence apparatus has to be a focus. And intelligence apparatus has to be a focus. Fourthly, given the hybrid nature of threats, it is important to adequately factor in information warfare, and the use of ICT, information and communication technology, and the use of ICT. Thirdly, next, fifthly, लिखो सॉल्यूशन लिखने में तो क्या बुराई क्या है. फिफ्थली, जितना सॉल्यूशन लिख पाओ एग्जाम में 2-3 तो कम से कम लिख के आओगे. फिफ्थली क्या कर सकते हैं? फोकस हैज टू बी ऑन de-radicalization efforts. Focus has to be on de-radicalization efforts. As well as winning hearts and minds. Focus has to be on de-radicalization efforts as well as winning hearts and minds through cultural and development initiatives. Focus has to be on de-radicalization efforts as well as winning hearts and minds through cultural and development activities. What would this do? To prevent potential recruitment by terrorist groups. To prevent potential recruitment by terrorist groups. सॉल्यूशन लिख दिया आपने, बहुत बढ़िया. टू प्रिवेंट रिक्रूटमेंट बाय टेररिस्ट ग्रुप्स. किसी का कुछ छूट गया हो आके मुझसे मिल सकते हैं बाद में. अब कंक्लूड कैसे करेंगे? कंक्लूड भी करना है. एग्जाम लिखोगे 3 घंटे पेपर, तो अभी ये लिख लो. कंक्लूड कैसे करेंगे? इज देयर एनी अदर थिंग दैट यू कैन मेंशन इन दिस कॉन्टेक्स्ट? आपके दिमाग में कुछ आ रहा है? डीलिंग विद टेररिज्म लिखो, कंक्लूड करो. डीलिंग विद टेररिज्म requires a global effort. In this context, requires a global effort. In this context, the earliest adoption of a comprehensive, the earliest adoption of a comprehensive convention against international terrorism, CCIT. In this context, the earliest adoption of a comprehensive convention against international terrorism as suggested by India, is the need of the hour, और आवर ऐसे जैसा कहेंगे बहुत सारे लोग, नीड ऑफ द आवर. अर्लीस्ट अडॉप्शन ऑफ व्हाट? CCIT, कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव कन्वेंशन अगेंस्ट इंटरनेशनल टेररिज्म. सो इंडिया ने इंटरनेशनली एक स्टेप सजेस्ट किया है, हमने उसको बचाया, वो क्योंकि अभी पूरा नहीं हुआ है इसलिए हमने उसको क्या कह दिया कि दिस इज नीडेड. ऑल राइट, सो वी स्टार्टेड by identifying certain important words. We are ending also with something concrete. सबको जाना है, मुझको भी जाना है. एक मिनट मेरी बात सुन लो. ऐसा शोर स्कूल में होता था जब वो छुट्टी की बेल बजती थी. Now you would benefit by doing what? Go to your wherever you live. Try and summarize this last part, this last question in 150 words and 250 words. दो चीजें होंगी इससे. 150 words, 250 words. अभी एग्जाम नहीं दे रहे हो, अभी अपने को टेस्ट कर लो, है ना. Practice is about testing yourself so that in the examination hall you are not testing yourself. In the examination hall you are giving your best. So right now test yourself. When you go back homes, 150 words, 250 words में इस क्वेश्चन का आंसर आपको इस कंटेंट से लिखने की कोशिश करनी है. What would happen? Then you would realize where your difficulties lie. कि आपके पास तो मटेरियल है, अब इसको लिखेंगे कैसे. And then you would also realize your strengths. आपको अपना सेंस आएगा आंसर लिखने का. Try and summarize this. एक प्रेसी राइटिंग भी होती है मेंस के अंदर लैंग्वेज के पेपर में, है ना. कई लोग लैंग्वेज पेपर में भी फेल होते हैं और कॉपी चेक नहीं होती. सो मल्टीपल पर्पजेज आर बीइंग सर्व्ड. रादर देन सेइंग कि मैं इसको कैसे लिखूंगा या कैसे लिखूंगी, द गुड थिंग इज, द बेटर थिंग इज टू ट्राई एंड राइट इट, एंड देन इन द नेक्स्ट क्लास कम विद योर डिफिकल्टीज, दैट दिस इज द डिफिकल्टी दैट आई फेस्ड, राइट. एवरी सेक्शन यू हैव रिटन कॉम्प्रिहेंसिवली, कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव आंसर हमने लिख लिया. समराइज इट 150 250 वर्ड्स. ये आपका काम है, होमवर्क है. So that is the end of today's class. Thank you very much for your time and attention. In the next class we will talk about Pakistan, Afghanistan. है ना, पाकिस्तान अभी बाकी है ना.